work session to order for Tuesday, July the 11th, 2023. We're going to call the roll. Vice Mayor.
Here.
Alderman Potts.
Present.
Alderman Hanson.
Present.
Alderman Peterson.
Here.
Alderman Berger.
Present.
Alderman Baggett.
Present.
Alderman Brown.
Present.
And Alderman Blanton.
Here.
And the mayor's here too, so everybody's here. Next are items for an opportunity for citizens to comment on items that are not listed on the agenda. And we have two speakers, Tiffany White and Paul Lebowitz. You have 2 minutes each. Please come to the podium. And following that, I have Alderman Potts that wants to read a letter of recognition, and then I'm going to follow that with a special comment from Mr. Stuckey and Paul Holzen. So I assume Tiffany?
Yes, hi, I'm Tiffany White, 20 Daniels Drive. You may know that I used to work for a traffic engineering company, and I primarily wrote traffic impact studies while I was there. I have found several concerning omissions in the Middle 8 traffic impact study. In the study, the intersection of Daniels Drive and the new street called Foster Lane is treated like a three-legged intersection. But the new street actually forms a fourth leg to the intersection with the existing driveway to the Jamison Station parking garage. The projected traffic volumes that were analyzed in the study do not consider any traffic turning on or off of this existing east leg of the intersection. This intersection is incredibly close to Liberty Pike. Also, there's another intersection on Daniels Drive just south of Foster Lane that is Jamison Station Lane. Although this street is not part of the Middle 8 project, it's about 100 feet south of the main access to the project. The volume and progression of traffic at all three of these intersections along Daniels Drive should be evaluated. All it takes is a couple of left-turning vehicles southbound on Daniels Drive that cannot turn to potentially block all southbound traffic and cause it to back up onto Liberty Pike. If northbound traffic is backed up waiting to turn onto Liberty Pike, this is a very real situation that could cause gridlock. Also, it should be noted that many vehicles use the driveway to Jamison Station Garage and Jamison Station Lane to turn around. The side window to my living room has a good view of this approach, and it's a very common occurrence. I don't quite understand what they're doing, but cars pull into that driveway and then they pull back out. I don't know if they're looking for parking or they just don't know where they're going. Additionally, the northbound approach at Daniels Drive at Liberty Pike is a hill, and it causes significant issues during the winter when we have icy conditions as vehicles slide down the hill. I have a few handouts to show the aerial view of these intersections, and I ask, what recourse do the neighbors have when we have gridlock from traffic and parking issues due to this huge project? Thank you.
And the handout you mentioned, if you will leave them here, and we'll make sure they get distributed to the board. Oh, that's fine. Sure.
Good afternoon. I'm Paul Lebowitz. I live at 102 Winslow Road, which is a block from the proposed project. The rezoning that's being requested for the Middle 8, my comments are regard to their parking. One was they were asking for a reduction in parking spaces, and also that they wanted to include street parking as part of their required parking spaces. If you allow the Middle 8 to reduce the number of parking spaces and include street spaces, you're setting a dangerous precedent for future land development in the city limits. I believe every developer will ask for street parking to be counted toward their respective requirements if you let the cat out the door. Old Liberty Pike is a mess on market and church days, and it'll be a haunting mess if less than the required parking spaces are approved. And a total mess if 44 street spaces are counting towards the middle parking total. If the Middle 8 actually approves and builds the single-family duplexes and triplexes across from the multi-story buildings, those residents will very likely utilize all the street spaces on their side of the street. So it's really not 44 free spaces. Don't let the parking arrangement sneak past you on this rezoning. The rezoning, that's okay. The neighbors have never minded that, okay? I want to make that clear. But the parking really should not be reduced. They need to have the number of spaces on site. So in the future, we don't have other developers saying, hey, they did it. We can do that too. I think it should be a condition of the rezoning that the parking all be on-site. And that's what I'm asking y'all to consider as you go through the motions the next meetings and today. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Potts, where did you go? Well, there you are. You didn't go far, did you?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Fellow Alderman, I'd like to invite a couple of guests to the podium with me right now. First, HR Director Kevin Townsend, and then this will be a first for me. I'd like to invite Jason Potts to the podium. And also Raven Strahan. Just wanted to take just a couple of minutes right now and provide some recognition. Recently, we were recognized as being one of the top employers here in the state of Tennessee, the only city organization, if I remember correctly. That's right. All right, excellent. And part of that is made up of a lot of City of Franklin colleagues, a lot of team members that are out there every single day, giving their time back to our citizens and then also giving to our community. Well, I wanted to share tonight some recognition that I received, and this is about Raymond actually giving back to our community in a very much larger sense and giving back to our future here. This is sent to me. It says, Dear Mr. Potts, as Scout Executive for West Tennessee Area Council, Boy Scouts of America, I am very pleased to inform you that your employee, Raymond Strahan, has used their personal vacation time provided by your company to serve as a volunteer leader at Camp McMorris, our Boy Scout summer camp. On behalf of Scouting, I always like to notify employers of their time given by their employee. The West Tennessee Council serves more than 2,500 Scouts and Scouters, with the majority of the leadership being provided by adult volunteers. Our programs, including camp, could not flourish and grow without their dedication and commitment to youth within our communities, from individuals like Raymond. Thank you for allowing Raymond the time to dedicate to the Scouting program. Yours in Scouting, Adrian Hackett, Scout Executive. And I'd also like to share that Raymond has been doing this for 9 consecutive years now. So Raymond, thank you.
To add on to that, Raymond has served the city for how many years now? You just hit a milestone, right?
It was 30 years.
30 years with the city. So Raymond's father also served in the city of Franklin, so he has a legacy here, working with the city and doing great work. So thank you, Raymond, for what you do on the job and in the community. Great job.
And next, Mr. Stuckey.
Yes,
Thank you
if
for
I-
bringing that to us, Jason.
Yeah, thank you very much. If we can just take a couple minutes, I shared this with the board earlier today, and I apologize for the lateness of this notice, but it's an opportunity that came to our attention at the end of last week. We have the developer of the Reese Farms neighborhood working on improvements to Del Rio, and the opportunity to have them extend their work and for the city to pay for that work on work we need to do anyway on Del Rio has presented itself. And we need to, though, give them some approval or some authorization to keep moving forward between now and when the next time the board meets, because you have 4 weeks between meetings. So I wanted to share that with you. It seems like a great opportunity for us, but I need to inform you, and if you have any concerns or reservations, please let me know. But we would love to move this forward and bring back to you the formal amendment to their impact fee agreement to allow for this work at your next meeting. But we need to give them some kind of a heads up or a thumbs up to move forward with this aspect of the job. It'll help us get it done sooner and less expensive, and also eliminate the potential of having to redo a sidewalk in some areas there that you might otherwise have to tear up later when you do the widening. So Paul can kind of walk through the key elements, and then if you have any questions, we'd be glad to answer them. And then if you have anything else later at the 7 o'clock meeting, we'll be glad to answer then as well. And then we'll bring it to you on August 8th for the formal approval amending the road impact agreement. So Paul, give them a quick overview of the additional work.
So one of our senior road inspectors that's out there every day took the initiative to look at this and recognize it as being one section that would be non-curb and gutter, just open ditch on Del Rio Pike, and asked the question, not only asked the question, why can't we just curb and gutter it now, but also went out and got a price from the contractor to see if we could do it. It just makes sense. The contractor's mobilized. Under $200,000 is the estimate, which we think is very reasonable. And honestly, we would probably spend $40,000 just trying to survey and design. And it just makes sense while they're on site to try to get it done. And again, as Eric stated, we wouldn't have to rip out curb and gutter in the transition area and repave, and it will not delay the project from getting open. They're still working, I believe, with AT&T, trying to get AT&T to move poles, but it will not delay them, and so we'd like your permission to proceed with that.
Alderman Brown.
You had me at sooner, so thank you.
Sooner and cheaper.
Sooner, cheaper's nice, but you had me at sooner. That was my question, is how it related to the other work we need to do and where AT&T, we've been waiting on that a little while. What is the impact on that timing on this timing?
It will not have an impact. They're still working on AT&T as far as I understand, last time I checked. I don't know the exact time frame. I know that they're in constant communication with AT&T to get them to move. Not only the developer, but also city staff, the road inspectors out there working directly with AT&T. Based on the schedules they've proposed, they could have this work done and actually allows them to keep working versus sitting stagnant.
Yeah.
So they would get this work done as they wait for AT&T, and
Okay.
we would be able to get it back open and resurfaced all in one top lift.
Showing progress there would be a wonderful thing, so full support. Thanks.
Alderman Potts.
I just had a couple of date questions. I agree with Alderman Brown here. I'm over there on a regular basis, so you've got my attention right now on this. So as far as dates go, do we have any firm or soft dates that
I would
be
say the
presented?
soft date I've heard is towards the end of August to have
Towards the end of
with
August?
AT&T's relocation, but I can certainly follow up and get that information to Eric and out to the board. We all want it open as soon as possible.
Yeah, and I was also going to recommend that once you get those dates, is to go ahead and communicate it to the schools that are adjacent to that location, and also the traffic safety officer that works right there as well. I'm sure this would impact him.
We will. August 4th is the date we've always been shooting for, and that's when my
Okay.
kids go back to school, so
All right, there you go.
I know that date well.
Okay.
Does that also include the culvert, this particular area, or is that?
No, sir, we would come back as a bigger project. It's different subconsultants that would do that type of work, and so we're coming back with a culvert project to the west as a separate project.
And you've approved the design work on that, but that is ongoing, and we'll follow up on that.
And that's-
That'll be a
that's what we're-
tag-on policy after this is,
A couple of years down the road.
project after this
Yes,
is
sir.
done.
Probably about 2 years down the road with the
Yeah.
right-of-way acquisition.
Everybody smiling? Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Williamson County CCTE STEM Emerging Careers Camp. This sounds interesting.
It is. I don't have the microphone yet, but this is sort of in the vein of highlighting connections with youth that you brought forward just a second ago. So way to tie everything together for me. Yeah, this is to highlight an event that we had in the community recently, and it showcases development in a different way than we typically bring forward to you. And I hope you see it's in a much more fun way. Williamson County Schools, through their CCTE program, put on a summer camp this year, and it was focused on STEM and STEM learning. And it was specifically focused on middle school girls, how females interact in the development community. Day one, and I'm sorry, Chris Schneider down there at the end, she's the organizer of the summer camp. Day one had the camp, we had a group of local professionals come. These are the professionals that came, so myself, Mary McGowan, you've seen her up here at the table before. Some of these other faces should look familiar. You got Katie Radowski, Kennedy Adams, so a group of us came. And, you know, we highlighted how the different roles we play in our job affect development. So the girls could learn sort of all the different ways that you could touch development. Also, as part of day one, we gave them a challenge on a site that you're familiar with, and Mary is going to describe that a little bit more.
Yeah, so we gave them a request for proposal to put together a team of consultants.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I don't know how to work these
Pull it a little
things.
closer if you would, Mary.
Okay, is this good? Awesome. So we gave them a challenge to do a request for proposal, but they had about 3.5 hours to put it together. We gave them a site, and it's the site that you see on your screen, which is the old Williamson County Animal Shelter, to redevelop it. They were given a budget. They were given, they had to come up with basically their executive summary of what they wanted to propose. They had to come up with their key personnel, their development vision, how it worked with Envision Franklin, a schedule, fees and construction, and then also they had to present at the end. So we had 4 different groups of girls, and so they each came up with something very different. So the first group had where they were going to revitalize the building and use it for a rehab center, like a physical therapy rehab center. The second group wanted to make it into an outdoor rec center to kind of play off what was across the street with Williamson County. The third group wanted to do a nursing home. And then the fourth group that won elected to do a daycare. And the winning group is also here tonight, but the reason why they won was not because we liked their idea the best, but was because they followed the directions the closest. Which, as we know, in adult world, you have to follow the directions, even as you do when you're younger. So we do have some of the girls here tonight. So we're going to ask them to come up here. Amy and I are going to step back, and we've kind of asked them to share kind of what was. We only had one day of the camp. There were 4 other days too, but we've asked them to share what was the most difficult day or the most difficult part of this day of the camp, and then also what was, kind of the best thing that they got out of it throughout the week. So we're going to bring them up.
And when you girls come up, why don't you give your name first, and then you can answer the questions. So, come on up.
Spread that so you can share.
Who's first?
Just go down the line.
Eric,
Go ahead and
are all the mics on?
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
so.
they're all on.
Give your name.
Oh, my name's Madeline Fisher.
Yeah, they're all on.
My name is Jocelyn Johnson.
My name is Arshi Moturi.
My name's Annabelle Bowman.
My name is Jenna Palmer.
So if you girls want to answer the first question, what was the hardest part about this day?
Go ahead and hold your mics closer. Because that way you don't have to.
They follow directions well.
I think the hardest part of the first day was figuring out, like, with all the rules of what you could build on the land plot that we had, and following the zoning areas for what you could build on the plot.
I think the most challenging part was understanding all that went into making an RFP and also the time management. I think the most challenging part was following the CI restrictions because there were so many things that we could and couldn't do. So yeah.
For me, I think the hardest part was for us to cooperate and all agree on one building.
Yeah.
I also agree on the zoning restrictions. That was the hardest part, just the buildings.
We find that hard too.
You guys aren't alone in that.
What was your biggest takeaway from the rest of the camp?
I think the biggest takeaway from the rest of the camp is that there's many different areas of jobs that women can do and how they all impact the community in a different way.
I think the biggest takeaway was learning about all the interesting jobs and how they help society run smoother, how they impact our city.
I think the most interesting part, I guess, was
probably learning about how all the jobs like work together because they're all so different, and like it's kind of difficult to understand how they're like all working together.
I think the biggest takeaway for me was learning about how each job can all like contribute to the community.
I also agree with them, and I think that, and the biggest takeaway was how they promote their businesses.
Questions from the board for them?
So has any of this interest you enough to further look into a career in some aspect of planning, of any aspect of that touches on the team effort that you did here in planning and in city government or anything of that nature? Has any of you had an interest and say, "Ooh, I was very interested in this. I'd like to pursue this, or at least look into the future"? Enough?
Great answers,
Well-
thank you.
No?
Alderman Hanson.
Thanks.
So which project was yours?
Oh, that was
The daycare?
Yeah, the
daycare.
daycare.
And we're going to start construction when?
So exciting, really exciting.
Good.
Good.
Thank you so much. I
Great.
think Melissa wants to get a picture.
Okay.
Do you want a picture together?
Sure.
Okay. Do you want to stand up right where you are, and the girls can gather around? I think the mayor wanted a picture.
Yeah.
Can we get a picture with the mayor? Walk around with the
Good job,
mayor?
girls. Good job.
Where you want us, there?
Right there's fine.
I like the shirts.
Yeah, you want us on there too?
Yes, please. Yes.
Those were cool too. I love how they put that together.
Okay, squeeze this picture a little bit more, everybody.
Take care for her parents. Sideways.
That would actually
Thanks for coming.
Well done.
Great job, girl.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda is update on the new City Hall architectural elevations.
So we'll bring our design team up. The board has provided feedback. Our historic zoning design review group has provided feedback, and we wanted to give you an update on that progress and some of what has come about in terms of options and ideas regarding the redevelopment of City Hall. And Kelly and Anna Ruth, you want to take it away?
Sure.
I'll lead in, if that's okay. Good evening, Board of Mayor and Aldermen, everybody. This evening, we're going to provide a short presentation, Anna Ruth and Kelly, on the 50% schematic design. And it's been before the Design Review Committee, the Historic Zoning Commission. And we're intentionally bringing it to you now so you can be prepared, and whether it's we have time this evening or before the time we come back in late August or right in early September with the 75%, we want to make sure you're included with the progress being made, because as we know, the Historic Zoning Commission, when we get to the end of the schematic design, we want it to be in a form that we're all in agreement with and that it can be approved for a certificate of appropriateness, which then allows us to move in with your approval, of course, to the construction design. At the last meeting, there was a general consensus of incorporating some retail that will not be shown at this particular time, but will evolve as we move into the 75 and 100%. So with that, I'll turn it over and
Thank you.
thank you.
I'm Anna Ruth Kimbrough. I'm the project manager and the consultant team representative for this project. Our team is very honored to continue on with the design of this very important project for Franklin. We look forward to continue to work with you to further develop the schematic design of the project. On the following slides, as Vernon said, I'm going to give a brief overview of the feedback received from the concept elevation studies that we sent to you. Okay, well, then it's going to go. You want to use yours or? And maybe that'll help. Okay. It's completely frozen. Excuse technical difficulties.
We need a new city hall.
Yes.
That's right.
We need the technology upgrade at least.
There we go.
Is that it?
Yeah, but it's still not going.
No.
Kelly, you want to plug it into yours?
Bring the puck over. You can plug it in there.
Angie's
Can you
got
pull
it.
it up? Go ahead, pull it up.
Angie, pull it up.
Okay. We're going to be reordering it a little bit.
Turn your button off.
Turn your button off.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. Okay. So, okay. Sorry about that. Our design team and city staff surveyed you, BOMA, and DRC members to gain feedback on 4 concept elevation studies after we shared the initial concept with you. In the feedback received, there are 5 recurring themes, which are listed on this slide. An arched entrance is preferred facing public square. The use of more stone and architectural detailing gives the building a civic presence while still blending well with the historic buildings on the square and on Main Street. More variation in building materials, fenestration, roof parapet, and breaks in the facade are desired along 3rd Avenue. The courtyard and breezeway provide a nice transition between the 3-story and 2-story portions of the building on 3rd Avenue. And the respondents generally agreed that the design of the 2-story portion of City Hall on 3rd Avenue needs further design development. Angie? So this slide has Concept 1 elevation study, and Concept 1 and all the feedback received by BOMA and DRC was the favored concept of the 4 elevations polled. Many were in favor of the celebratory arched entrance, and most respondents were in favor of the building materiality of Concept 1, with the use of more stone and architectural detailing to give the building a civic presence. We heard that the arched openings along the 3rd floor pay homage to the old City Hall without mimicking it, and many respondents are in favor of the incorporation of classical elements, such as the pediment, the balcony, and without overtly copying the courthouse. We also heard that the architectural detailing harmonizes nicely with the historic character of downtown. Angie. So this slide summarizes the feedback we received on the 3rd Avenue elevation concepts. Again, Concept 1 was the preferred option, which is the concept at the top of the slide. There were elements of option 3 and 4 that many respondents liked, like the break in the parapets and the materiality variation and fenestration variation in option 4. So the massing and scale along 3rd Avenue, many of the respondents are still concerned about it. So they asked the design team to study breaking up the heights, massing and scale of the 3rd Avenue elevation. So in your packet, we're going to probably skip through the next couple slides. In your packet, we provided a summary of the feedback we received in the June 21st meeting with DRC for your review. We are currently working on further developing these elevations with Concept 1 as our starting point. We plan to return to DRC on July 31st to share the 75% elevation progress. And then we plan to come back to the August 22nd BOMA work session to give a budget update. We're also working to incorporate the commercial into the design of the project currently as well. So with that, that's our brief update, and we thank you for your time and your continual feedback.
Alderman Peterson.
well, the thing that I mentioned, of course, wasn't mentioned by anybody else, but I have the thought of taking all that retail and everything at the corner and building a parking garage there, so you don't have to build the underground parking garage. Because really, we're not using that for anything else, and it would be much cheaper, much cheaper.
We too had that thought in phase one, and we studied it in depth of adding another parking garage. One concern is having two parking structures on one block in downtown Franklin. Do we really want that? But more logistically, we could not fit it with the current zoning requirements of screening of parking garages that's required. The Second Avenue parking garage could not be built today with current zoning. That's the short of it. So we have many studies that we could probably.
So you're saying the Second Avenue parking garage, what about the screening for the one on Fourth Avenue then? What do you mean the screening?
Anna Ruth is referring to the requirement in downtown Franklin that parking structures have first floor activated uses along those. But really the area is very tight, and they studied several different alternatives to try to look at an above ground structured parking, but it didn't achieve the number of spaces that we were looking for, and it's still a costly endeavor.
And another
But it
issue
doesn't
is
cost $9 million, does it?
another.
Well, there wasn't enough, there's not enough space to get the parking spaces that you need to serve the facility. That's the bottom line.
And it's in the residential scaled area of the neighborhood. We didn't feel it was appropriate to put a parking garage up against the residential structures on Church and further down Third.
But also, right next to it is there's a commercial, an office building, so I'd like to have some further investigation into that.
Alderman Baggett.
I'd like to, I think this is going in the right direction. I think we've got some, I encourage all the aldermen to watch the historic zoning design review on this too, because a lot is talked about that is important, will be important in our discussions for sure. And getting us all caught up in these work sessions for hours and hours of DRC meetings is, I really encourage the aldermen to watch all of those meetings. It's very important. I would ask the 75% elevation that we would have a more in-depth kind of feedback session with aldermen where we can get into some of the specifics that maybe not the minutia that maybe historic zoning gets into. But I do think it would be good to give us a little bit of time, as it develops to really discuss together. I know we've done that individually in emails, which I think is probably pretty effective just from a time standpoint. But I think also hearing some other people's ideas on the details, I think would be helpful for me at that next 75% stage. I don't want to.
Yeah, if I may, because
go ahead. Sure.
that certainly has a lot of merit to take a bit deeper dive, because also what we're in the process of beginning is honoring your other request of hiring somebody to for no other better term, to look at value engineering and look at what those trade-offs will be in the cost. And as Anna Ruth mentioned, when we come back with on the 22nd, or maybe the first meeting in September or somewhere in between, will be to look at to give you a much better idea of what's included in the budget. And then once we get to 100%, as we promised, we'll have two independent contractors cost estimate where we are at that point in time. So just, there's a lot of merit to what Alderman Baggett said, and you'll definitely have more information on the project scope as well as the architecture, because we'll been back to the DRC yet again before we come back to you then.
And the reason I say that is because we, I guess, this is maybe procedurally, but we're building the building, BOMA is, right? And so what does historic zone, I know we've talked about this before, but can they We have to get a COA. We don't.
You're in the historic district.
But we
so it
have
has
to get a
the-
COA.
Yes.
The same
Any
way.
building in the historic district has to get that approval.
I guess here's what I'm wanting to
Doesn't matter who
avoid
builds it.
is some sort of design aspect that they choose. This board not necessarily being. I want to avoid that.
And that's why you're giving the opportunity for multiple opportunities for input. They're giving feedback, you're giving feedback. We're trying to have them aligned so there's no surprises when you come to getting
But I think we'll need more
recommendations
than
of what's
this time
appropriate.
to do. I think
Yeah.
we'll need more than this short time to do that. Is what I'm saying.
Okay,
So
sure.
the next time, the 75%, because this isn't much more than we've already given feedback on.
Right.
But the 75% I would think would be more, and I'm just asking
Exactly.
at that time maybe to let us give some more. Thank
Sure,
you.
yeah, definitely.
And I'd just like to add that we're encouraged by the consensus building that's taken place with these 4 options and the direction moving towards option 1. So when we're talking with the design review committee, we're really focusing in on option 1, which is what we heard from the board and the DRC on those design details as we move forward to further flesh out the plans.
But we understand the benefit of having you talk about it together, and that'll be part of what we provide time for August 22nd and beyond as you need it.
The other item I'd like to share with you is that in the coming weeks, we're going to create some boards of the elevations of where they are and evolving to, but also the test fits to put in the City Hall lobby so our employees and citizens can start to take a look at them and leave some comments. So when we get to the 75% and 100%, we're trying to be more transparent and inclusive. So you'll see those in the lobby in the very near future.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
Vice Mayor?
The number of parking places that Ann was referring to, the underground was 210, right? So what is the one that she was referring to on the corner? How many parking places are we talking about?
I would have to look back. That was 2 years ago. So we can pull it back up from phase 1, but we looked at it in different configurations. It just
Somewhat ironic
circulation-wise didn't work.
that we don't know how many it is.
It's a
but we-
tighter footprint.
Yeah.
But we know that it's not enough.
It's not 200.
Okay.
And it was
As I
also
say,
the scale of the structure
We
and
start having to go
as to
higher.
where it is on the site. There were a number of factors that led to underground was the most efficient solution for the site.
When you say most efficient, doesn't it cost a lot more? I mean, a great deal more, maybe twice as much, or maybe even more than that, than above ground.
You still got
Well,
additional questions, Vice Mayor?
No, I'm listening and I
It
may
may
have
not
a
be
question.
linear because you're building more levels too. I mean, it's,
Well, right.
so we'll give you a more of a summary of that, but it was pretty thoroughly reviewed.
It's kind of up and down. I mean, you got going up and then going up the other way to make one floor, you know, and so on like that, so.
So we're still at 99 million for the project?
We're working our way down from that.
Down?
Yes.
Oh, that's a pleasant surprise.
That's what we're working on.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's-
But there'll be some things you'll need to provide some feedback on.
Yes.
That help us bring that down. There are some trade-offs.
Yes.
So you'll have opportunity to hear about that.
'cause we've been coasting uphill.
For one example is to reduce some of the costs is minimizing the height of the parking garage, which keeps the base floor elevation up higher. And I know Alderman Peterson has a concern that there's water infiltration, although we're not, we've looked at it and we don't feel that is a concern at all. But reducing the height of the parking structure so it meets our needs and not any more, will save some costs too. And we'll show that to you when we come back.
Alderman Berger.
Okay, let's watch our words. Because, and I'm not digging on you, Vernon, please, I'm not really. I think, we talk about, I like facts and I like hard facts. And the thing is, I think when we're talking about this parking garage, we were talking about experts in their fields. Aldermen can have their own opinions, and when you said something about, I just jumped on it because it's a pet peeve of mine when somebody says, we feel. I frankly don't care how people feel. And we can all have our opinions, which we all look at and listen to. And that's what we're supposed to do, be giving our opinions, and I think that's what you meant. I'm not trying to harp on you, it's just a buzzword to me. So I want to use that to bring us back to say, let's look at the experts who are in stormwater, who are in construction, and go with that. Because all day long, we can all have our opinions, and we can all have our feelings, and we can all have our likes. But we're building a parking garage, and we're going to do it right, and we're going to get the expert advice, like you're bringing us, Vernon, and you're a stickler on that too, which I thank you for, and Eric, because you don't want to build something that's going to flood. If we're doing that, then we don't want to do that. But you've assured us, we've also talked to the experts, they've consulted with you, you guys at planning have, and Taylor, you've looked at these, you've done your due diligence, and I think we have to keep saying to ourselves, let's trust the experts to consult with us on these kinds of really integral, important aspects of the building.
Well, I just to think about that, I would like to have someone who is knowledgeable, who remembers whenever the bank was built over here, and they had a basement where people came to big banquets and everything, and they had to close it down because of the water. And it's right next door to us.
We've been talking about that at length.
Well,
with
please
our
find out from someone who knows and knows something about that, and also who remembers what the problem was. Because I may be the only one.
Let her address it. Yeah.
We have requested historic data from the previous owners, which is First Tennessee Bank. I personally was the architect on the renovation for that project, so we did see the slab removal for additional elevator sump pits that are even 5 feet lower than that basement level. The new garage level, which is at the lowest point it will be, we're looking at, as Vernon said, raising it, is 3 feet higher than that basement level because, as you know, this finished floor is 2 feet higher than the 231 public square finished floor. And we actually had an hour-and-a-half call with the geotech expert today talking about the type of waterproofing membrane we should put under this slab in relation to value engineering. Do we really need to go to that expense? And we're getting historical data. That slab next door was built in 1972, and the reason that it ever flooded was the sump pump failure. And they didn't have a redundant pump system. When we did the renovation, we added a redundant system. It has not flooded since then, and as you know, we had a bad flood 2021, or bad rain, and it didn't flood then. And there's finished space in that basement. This is going to be a parking garage. So there's also the option, if we have a 2010 flood event, there's an evacuation plan for cars. And we're not putting anything down there that's human occupied space besides the locker rooms and lockers, which could flood. They're going to be tiled. So I just want to ensure you that we are doing all we can on due diligence wise with the geotechnical engineer. He's even looking at what the Pinnacle flooding happened downtown, and they're much closer to the river than we are to the Harpeth here. So we are really looking hard at it.
Alderman Baggett, do you have another comment?
Real quick. I think it'd be beneficial for this board, for the efficiency of continuing on with this, is that we make a decision, vote or something on this parking deck under the ground, because we have spent a majority of the time today when we are looking at 5 or 6 slides of design related things that quite frankly are important, and so is the parking deck. We got to get this behind us and either all agree that we're going to do it and then let's move on, or not. And I think I would ask the mayor to consider that, and show of hands, informal. It doesn't have to be a resolution, but we've got to get on a consensus here, or else we're going to be spending the next 6 months talking about this parking deck. And let's get all this out there, but let's just decide and let's move on and talk about the things that we need to talk about related to design, or else we're going to be here 6 months from now. We haven't even talked about what it looks like.
And I think we strayed way beyond what the idea of the presentation was tonight. And we look forward to the next element. I appreciate the professional, expert opinions that you've rendered on the questions that have been asked. And as the process moves forward, we're going to be able to continue to address those important issues. And I agree with Alderman Baggett that we need to continue to move forward in some form or fashion. So, thanks, Anna Ruth.
Are we allowed any
Sure.
other questions? What are
I think Alderman Baggett asked a question. Ask it again. He wanted a show of hands. I'm not used
Show
to
of
that.
hand- who is in favor? I mean, I'm not going to, I don't know, this is informal, so you're kind of, but who's in favor of the parking garage or continuing to study it underground? I'm in favor of the underground parking garage.
I'm seeing a few hands go up and some hands are afraid to go up. I see.
Mine's not afraid to go up, but you haven't gotten to the point that I'm going to vote on yet. The first thing you asked was who's in favor.
Well, I saw a majority of hands that indicated to continue to move forward on the parking garage concept. That doesn't mean,
Let's look again at the money, if you don't mind, and I don't mean tonight. I
thank
definitely
you.
would want to do that.
Well, I want to
because that is
continue
a
to move
great
on
deal
if I
of
might, because I think we're
Sure.
getting in some areas that we're not really prepared, and that wasn't the idea of the presentation.
Thank you.
Item 3 is, I'm sorry, Vice Mayor, did you have one more
I
question?
had one more question. Specifically, the two engineers that are at the end of the project, what are we supposed to get out of those? Tim,
You're talking about the owner's representatives?
Yeah, whatever.
So what they do is they help us look at value engineering opportunities to reduce the cost of the project and what those trade-offs are. It's a third
So-
party to look at your design and your cost implications and your potential trade-offs.
So they will
Help
trim,
us-
so they should trim some of the fat out of the project.
There to look at how what the opportunities are to reduce the budget.
Okay, my comment is as good as the other.
No,
Okay, item 3 is Resolution 2023-52 to award the construction contract, City of Franklin Contract 2022-0315 for the Bicentennial Park Project to Sane Construction Company in the amount of $10,281,197.
We had 3 bids on this project. 2 were very close. There was actually a 4th bidder that missed the deadline to submit. He was right there. They were right there with the 2 lower bids, but ultimately, we were very excited to move this project forward. Sane is who we work with for the Franklin Special School District. Lisa has been working on this for a long time. We've had lots of help from our Parks Department, Street Department, Department Review Team, lots of involvement, and we're excited to move this capital project forward.
Go ahead, because it's your baby. Yeah.
Ask anything you want. I just got to cheer.
No,
If I need to give hugs, I will. But this is exciting. What were you going to ask, though?
Ma'am.
May, please.
No, I'm so excited for you. I know there's been jokes around city staff, we should
No.
change the name because it's taken so long, but I think, I'm so glad we're moving forward because the longer we wait, the more existing structures, which we have none left anymore, except for the art piece, if that's still there. But
It is.
I'm very excited that this is finally coming to fruition, and I'm happy about this price as well.
Absolutely.
Is this going to include the parking, does this include the parking lot?
It does not include the parking lot. We
additional.
thought we'd bring that back as a separate CIP project to see how you want to proceed with it. What we are doing is clearing and grubbing it and grading it. It won't be reinforced or paved, but it could potentially, on occasion,
You could have
use.
some overflow parking.
So we will use it for temporary parking for the events, or if you have a pumpkin fest or other things, we can still use it. You just can't use it every weekend or you'll have a mud bath, and that's just part of it. But it's exciting. It's exciting. So it'll be wonderful for our community, and we're so thankful. So thank you so much.
I've got the Vice Mayor, then Alderman Berger, then Alderman Peterson. Were you holding your hand, or are you just excited, period?
No, what I mean is, on the first list that we got, it said it was $1 million and it's 10
That was missing a 1.
Yeah, it was-
11.7.
Go ahead, Vice
Let
Mayor.
go of my part, and I apologize.
I'm gonna, if possible, tie up item 4, which it says the capital investment program. This item right here was approved in 2019.
Yes, sir.
So what was the amount on the capital improvements project for this item right here in 2019?
In 2019, when it came out in 2018, when we did the preliminary, we were around, because we were not looking to do any road improvements on North Margin. So all of that was part of it, as well as we were not including the parking lot that we're including in this, what we said that was being left out. You were looking around 4.7 million when we added that to the master plan. Then during COVID, we came back and adjusted those figures, and it was right around 8.5 million when we added those things in.
So when we approved the project, on the capital improvements projects list, when it was approved, when it got enough points out of it, when we all did our point thing, was it 4.7 million then?
Yes, sir.
Give or take?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So it's now at 11 million? And my point is this. Here's my point that I'm trying to make. If you take a 2019 capital improvements project list that was approved then, and you go back and you look at City Hall, and City Hall was, I'm sure, a placement number that 24 million plus the 8 million for the garage, which made it 32 million. It is now at 99 million. This project right here then in 2019 was 4.7 million, and it's now 11 million. I think, and I could be wrong, but I think we need to go back at some point in time and look at the capital investment program to see, because I don't see how, if those two projects we're just picking out would mean that the things that were approved in 2019, if they followed the same pattern as these, they would be 3 times as much. And we were supposed to, if I remember correctly, we were supposed to do 328 million out of the 600-something million that we recognized projects. We would be looking, if that's the case, and I hope that's not, we'd be looking at $900 million on the things that were approved in 2019, that on new money now that was approved in 2019. And I think that I know we get all excited about a contract and somebody's coming forward, and somebody's doing this and somebody's doing that. But I don't think we know where we are as far as money is concerned on the projects that have been approved that we're back looking at. And I have no problem with the park. Probably voted for it. Probably is on the list someplace that I voted for that. City Hall is not. I'll make that a point. But do we not need to go back?
That's
If
what
I could
item
just
4 is all
interrupt you,
about.
I think item 4 is
And
the
that's-
start of what we're going to be doing, looking
fine.
back at those capital projects. And it's going to be a process for the next 6 to 9 months as we go through and learn about all the projects, potential new projects we want to add. And at some point in time, we'll be able to express our opinion, what we think the top projects are.
So is it appropriate or inappropriate then to put this project in here at 11 million? Is that, I mean, we're just going to say, take that one out. We'll do that one for 11 million. So if we do and I have no problems in doing what we're doing, but I don't think we know, I know we don't, where we are as far as the total amount of money involved in capital improvements projects. I know where we were in 2019, give or take.
And we updated it about a year and a half ago and shared all those numbers with you then.
Well,
And so we're in the process of sharing that with you tonight. That's what the rest of your discussion is here. You've got projects in various stages of development, and it's not a static thing. The numbers and the costs evolve, and what we thought it was in 18 and changed in 19 and changed in 22, and we're looking at that again today. And so what we tried to show you a year and a half ago, and we will show you to you in the next agenda item, is kind of where those are in that project lifespan, what those updated best estimated costs are at this stage, and how that fits in. And then you'll have the opportunity to give us feedback. There are certain ones that we have invested significant money in to get to the stages they're at. And we sort of identified that for you previously, and we'll identify that for you again tonight, where there are ones that are not very far along that make sense potentially to revisit or put back into your prioritization process. But then there are also those that you've literally spent $1 million, a couple $1 million on. You're pretty far along, and you want to deliver on projects that were high priorities. This is an example of that. You've already spent significant funds on the project. Now is the time to decide if you want to keep moving forward on that. Or if you want to hold till you do an updated financial model, which may take a significant period of time. And so that's part of what we're trying to show you.
Two
I've
projects.
forgotten who was next after Vice Mayor, if he's done. Who, was it Alderman Berger, then Alderman Peterson?
I just wanted to ask about the company, Asane Company.
Yes,
We've
ma'am.
done work, have we done work with them with the,
We just, may I?
what's
Yeah,
our,
please.
what's our history with that?
We just finished with that company with Franklin Special School District. So you just opened that particular park and that partnership at the ball fields.
And how
So
did
we had
everything go?
we had a very good experience with them.
Okay, just checking.
Alderman Peterson.
I was going to say,
Ann, move your mic closer.
okay, sorry. We've talked about the list and everything, but we really haven't done the real prioritization in some time.
Right.
And so, and
That's what the process we're getting ready to start.
Right,
That's item
right.
4.
And so that
Yes.
definitely needs to, is
Absolutely.
something that we need to
And
do.
it is, as I just said, it's a process that we're going to start entering into, and it's going to last 6 to 9 months. So, yeah. Anybody else?
Thank you.
How about item 4? That seems to have generated a lot of enthusiasm already. The City of Franklin Capital Investment Program. I'm sorry I said City Hall. I guess that's on my brain.
So you gave us it was almost like a preview of coming attractions in the last item. So what this represents is the update of our 10-year capital investment program. We last updated this in 2019 when this was established. We provided you with some updates along the way, and we're ready to walk through a process for you to do an update, both on existing approved projects, the opportunity to look at those priorities both within what you previously approved, but also other projects that might be out there, other projects that might not even be on our menu that you think might be important. So over the next several months, we'll lay out a process for you to look at where we are with the existing projects and other opportunities to do that work for community improvements. And so we'll walk through that for you tonight with an outline of the update that we have, and it sort of kicks off that process. We expect there to be multiple work sessions and opportunities by the different project categories over the next several months as we look at where we are and what the opportunities are to do other important priorities, all within the context of what is our capacity to do it and what is our ability to add capacity to that program overall. So we'll kick it off with Paul and Michael and walk you through that. And again, this is sort of the start of it, and we'll be working pretty consistently over the next several months in these work sessions and in special work sessions to evaluate and get your feedback.
Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is just kind of give you an overview. I know many of you have been through the CIP prioritization, but not everybody. Is really what is it? Half of you, yes, ma'am. What is the definition of our capital improvement plan? What is that? We're going to give you an update on the CIP progress and the scorecard that Michael shared with you guys back in the day. Over the last month, we spent a tremendous amount of time estimating a lot of different projects and looking at current pricing, also taking into consideration the time it would get to construction and what that inflation could potentially look like, and adding that in. And we'll also discuss the potential of re-examination of projects as the Board of Mayor and Aldermen desire, and talk about the CIP prioritization schedule that we'd like to propose, and then ultimately get your feedback. So the City of Franklin defines a capital improvement plan as a document issued separately but in coordination with the budget document. The CIP is a plan or schedule of project expenditures for public facilities and infrastructures, buildings, roads, parks, with estimated project costs, source of funding, time of work over a 10-year period. We're trying to look in the short term, but also the long term, and looking at any project we believe may be needed in those 10 years for you all to consider. Generally, we break the projects down into 5 categories. We break it out as emergency services, general services, parks and rec, stormwater, and transportation. And again, we're working on finalizing that list now. And what I'm going to do is turn it over to Michael to talk about where we are with our current projects and the proposed budgets based on the latest numbers that we can estimate.
Thank you, Paul. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the board. Michael Walters Young, your Budget and Strategic Innovation Manager. On the screen currently, you can see the updated summary of the 37 approved projects via Resolution 2019-68 by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, which comprise your capital investments plan. There are 4 phases that we break them into. Technically 5, and you'll see that on the next slide in a moment. But that would be completed, under construction, bidding, right-of-way acquisition, and in design. If you want to go to the next slide. In your packets, and please reference the attachments referenced corrected, you'll see the heat map, sort of a one-page summary that gives you an idea of where we are regarding each of those 37 projects. So if we go to the next slide, Paul, you can see that there are 11 projects which are fully completed. Those range from several stormwater projects to Fire Station 7, to some paving projects, to most significantly major road resurfacing, the ball fields of Franklin Special and Franklin Road. That totals $50.7 million of total expenditure on 11 completed projects. To give you an update, 17 months ago when we last presented this in front of you, we had 7 completed projects and roughly $14 million worth of expenditure. So there is continual progress being made on the list as you have approved it with the projects as they've been put forward. The next slide shows projects under construction. This had 5 projects totaling roughly $42 million, and you see that there are 6 projects listed totaling $33.8 million. Now, the major difference there, of course, is as projects go to completed and work their way through the process, they move from under construction. The only project that was on this list 17 months ago was the home racing project. That is, as you remember, a sort of continual process that the Army Corps of Engineers is taking the lead on. Next slide. Under the yellow category, under rights-of-way acquisition, Jordan Road and McEwen Phase 4 were still on this slide 17 months ago. We've added Lockwood Glen Dam and Park as well as the Lewisburg Avenue sidewalk improvements. And the final slide, the red category, are those projects, there's 19 of them, which are deemed still within design. These are among the more significant projects in terms of scope, time, and cost. That would include City Hall, that would include Long Lane, that would include Southeast Park, among others. That totals $329 million worth of estimated costs. So of the nearly $483 million in estimated cost for the 37 projects, 421 million are either fully complete, actively under construction, in a right-of-way, or heavily committed in the design aspects of the projects. So the final slide that I will talk about is this one. This takes sort of the 8 lowest projects, or the 8 projects which have had the least activity on them would be the best way to phrase this. That totals nearly $62 million of estimated cost, and you have spent roughly $275,000 to date on them. We point that out to you, and this is similar to the list that we gave you 17 months ago, and many of these projects are exactly the same. That gives you an idea of when it comes time, as Paul will outline and Eric will complete, regarding this process that we're about to undertake for the revisitation, addition, subtraction, and ranking of capital projects. These are the ones that, quite honestly, I don't want to call them in play, but certainly are ones that you have not vested significant time or money towards at this exact moment. Paul?
So really looking forward to getting your feedback on it, but as far as moving forward with the prioritization, what we'd like to do is through August through October is to schedule special work sessions to review potential BOMA priority projects. We've identified around 70 different projects that fall into various categories for your consideration. I'm sure there's more, and we welcome your feedback on that. Where we would, as staff, present those projects, help you understand the costs, the challenges, the opportunities that exist. And then November through December, Michael and our finance department would look at our funding capacity, and we would be able to provide you with a final list of projects for prioritization. And then January through the March timeframe, we would like to work with the board to finalize that prioritization and start working on any new projects that have been added. And at this point, we welcome any feedback that you have.
Alderman Brown.
Three questions. First of all, thrilled that this is coming up and waiting for this, and I'm sure there's going to be lots of debate. It should be great. In the work session, one of the things that'll be really helpful, especially for those of us new, is not just to understand what the project is, but to get perspective from previous board members on why certain priorities were made before, how those may have changed. But there's a historical perspective that would be good to have, not just from staff, but even from the board. So I don't know what kind of time frame you're looking at for that session, but I can only imagine 70 projects. And the insight I'd like to gain, I would assume that's going to be a fair amount of time required. So just throwing that out there and willing to give that time to be able to hear my colleagues talk about that historical perspective. So second thing, on the categories, do those, other than just an organizational structure, do they have any other implication?
They really don't, except for just like projects, types of projects.
Okay.
The previous CIP, gosh, 80% of the funding went to transportation projects.
Well,
somewhere
and that
in
was actually where my
neighborhood.
question
So-
was a little bit, because we tie roads and sidewalks together.
Yeah.
And so I didn't know if there was a dominance in there. There's a part of me that would actually look at sidewalks maybe even as a part, like, I don't know if those two things together in that category. Yeah, I would almost kind of separate those two out, but that's.
A lot of
just
times
a
they're
point.
together.
I understand.
And other times they are their own projects, so we can look at how you want to talk about those. And our general sense in the way we've done it in the past is sort of bring those groups or those categories together so that you're kind of looking at some similar projects together, recognizing that there is a significantly higher number in that transportation category. So we may want to look at how to split that out. And the thought is that these would largely be special work sessions, so that's what you're doing.
Okay.
You're talking about projects, you don't have other things on your agenda, you're focused on that group of projects for that time and just learning about them, giving us feedback. If there's something we're missing that we should be looking at as a project option, we can do that as well. But it's determining kind of the menu first and understanding what should be on
There's
there.
also a difference, Eric, if I may, in the way they're funded. If you look at like
Yes.
hotel motel tax, that typically will fund a parks project. Or if you look at a fire station, that comes from a totally different funding
Yes,
mechanism. So there is some differentials between how these categories are funded. So sometimes we may be able to get more parks projects done because we have more money in that hotel motel bucket.
Or the parkland impact with the different
Absolutely.
quadrants in that. Sometimes
So
certain
sometimes
projects,
they'll
you
come
got
back-
money, you really, can only go to certain types of projects and you have an alignment
Yeah, so
there
that's
as well.
a big difference
And
too.
so maybe some standalone sidewalk could actually go up into that category or whatever. So
We
can talk
do
about
try
that.
to identify with each project what some of the funding options are. We're not doing a detailed breakout budget, but you see, here are some of the options to fund this type of improvement.
When we get into that.
Yeah, you'll see that there's 3 or 4
Gives those
potential funding options. Now, obviously, can't do them all, so there's trade-offs with that too, but you get a sense of what could help support each project.
And with the sidewalks, what we have historically done is if it's along a roadway, it goes with the transportation because they generally turn into roadway projects. If it's off-site through a trail system, it's in the Parks and Recs category, but they're all very well coordinated in our Parks Master Plan and Transportation Plan.
Okay. Last thing, and I don't want to get into individual items, but on the home raising, do we really think we're going to actually incur that
We are
expense?
17.5% of the cost, and right now the estimate is based off of the recent bids that we have been getting. William Banks has been working directly with the U.S. Army Corps, and, you know, it's really largely dependent on how many homeowners decide to proceed with that project.
It's just
So
taking so long that I think some people are just
Exactly.
walking
And
away.
the
So I
cost
just
has
didn't know
gone
where to
up
go.
significantly for
Exactly.
all the partners
Yeah.
involved, so.
Well, and I'll tell you, the
Yeah.
bids that have come back are not private, are not free market bids. I know that's all we got.
Yeah.
But you know,
I understand.
there's an element of this is a government project. Because I've gotten a quote or seen a quote recently of a $75,000 for the similar type home raising for that type of home, and they're $300,000 for this project, and there's nothing we can do about it. The bids are the bids.
Yeah, we've tried to get more
But it's just, I know it's just,
participants, bidders, yeah.
we can't create bidders, but it's frustrating. And
Yes, it is.
I've got Alderman Berger, then I'll take the vice mayor.
Yeah, go ahead, Michael, you had something.
Well, no,
You wanna-
just to
I'm
be
sorry.
clear, that the number in the
He
schedule
was
is
cut off.
a total estimated cost
Kind of a
for the entire project,
maximum.
not our 17.5%.
But that's not
Yes,
our
thank you.
17.5%.
No.
No.
Why do you have all of it in there?
Because it's funded collectively by the Corps, the property owner.
But
and the
we're
city.
not going to pay $11 million.
So when you, in
We're
the
gonna pay
CIP
7
sheets and the financial models where we all break all that out.
Right.
honestly.
Well, when we were ranking that one, we
You
don't
do
need
that
to be
when you rank
ranking
it.
it at
Yeah.
$11 million because that's however many $1 million. You do the math, whatever the difference.
No, it's different.
Come on, Michael.
Yeah.
No, we don't, yeah, you're not gonna,
You see what I'm saying?
yeah, but you only get that money, that match through a certain way. So it's a total project budget, but it's only, 65% of it comes from the federal government. So
Yeah.
you can't use that money anywhere else.
Correct. The net
So,
would be.
yes, yeah.
Okay, I think I've offended Alderman Peterson that maybe I've skipped over
Go
her.
ahead, she can go before me.
And so I'm going to skip over Alderman Berger and go to
Yeah,
Alderman
that's fine.
Peterson.
No, I just
So
didn't want to
everybody will
cut
be-
them off because I knew he was like at the mic.
I just have a
This
question.
is like refereeing.
Yeah, that's right.
It is.
that's right. No, I just
Get your
have
whistle out.
I just have a question, and that is, we talked about 17 months ago. I need someone to give me the exact date of that because.
February?
It was February.
It was
22.
It was in
22.
February of 2022.
I mean, which
Our
one,
last work
which
session.
meeting was it? Because I've tried, I can't find that I have any of my information about that, and I wanted to go back and actually look at what we did there in the minutes and things like that.
It
It's very
was-
similar
it
to
was
this presentation.
2/22/22.
That's easy,
Yeah.
isn't it?
22.
Thank
And it
you.
was a lot of the same structure with
Mm-hmm.
that heat map kind of thing and the different
I know.
costs
I
and the
just- I
different
just wanted to-
categories. So it's pretty similar to what you just saw.
Okay, will you yield to Alderman Berger now before I go to the vice mayor?
All right, real quick. So y'all were talking about sidewalks, right? So when we look in this page here, the list below are potential projects that could be reexamined, that one. Where'd that go? It just went off my thing. Well, anyway. So, yeah, I'll have to get back to it. So when I'm looking at that, what number are we? Is that capital? Okay, I don't
It's
know. I
11.
just went
Track.
presentation. Okay, I'm sorry, it just went off my screen. So we're looking at that. If you look at that last slide, if you take a look at the sidewalks, here we go. Main Street sidewalk repair, we're talking $3 million. That, to me, I want us to look at low-hanging fruit because, first of all, low-hanging, lower cost, but also safety. Because if we have sidewalks that we do repair if we do that
Right,
already.
right.
But if we think it also creates safety, better safety, because Main Street is well-traveled, as we know, with all our residents and our visitors. So I would think that we'd want to take a look at that in a little different light and what that all entails, because that project.
We are addressing safety issues on an
Oh, I know
ongoing
that.
basis. This is really more of a streetscape refresh
Okay,
that we
totally.
looked at.
Has
So
nothing to do with safety then?
We're
Okay.
addressing safety issues on an
I know,
ongoing
every
When
basis.
it
So
started
that's
out
not-
as a tree
yeah.
planting project,
So-
and then we
Right.
went.
It deals with tree wells, but
Right.
it also deals with refreshing the pavers and how we do all that.
Yeah.
It just as it's
Right.
aged, it's time for
Well,
a refresh,
It's
is the
really
idea.
not that expensive on here, and I looked at that and I thought, wow, okay. And then, so for all of us, or for all of you that weren't here for our other meetings on prioritizing these things, I think when we look at the categories in each of the projects, then Eric, you are you're actually, and Michael, you're actually giving us the funding sources. You know, you're saying that could be actually funded from this fund or that fund, or it can only be funded from this one fund. So we are really given those parameters so we know where that money is coming from.
And so generally the way that this has worked is when you review the projects, we will give you estimates on where those could come from.
Yes.
When you get your list ranked at the end of the process or near the end of the process, then we try to work whatever magic we can in the actual distribution and funding plan.
Yeah.
From which source, in what amount, to maximize the cash contributions of those particular elements. Obviously, if you only have X amount of money set aside in each of these pots. So you could end up having funding potential for 5 times that amount, but you still only have that one amount. When we get to the end of the process, we'd be able to do the best we can in the distribution of those funds. But initially, as you review the projects, we want you to be able to evaluate the projects for certainly the funding opportunity, a la, a parks project that may only have certain sources, but also your level of importance. So then we can then try to figure out the best recommended way to finance it.
And when we look at our level of importance, we're looking at safety, we're looking at economic development, we're looking at numerous things, Paul.
Congestion, yep,
Congestion.
all that.
You might want to refresh us with those lists, because that list was, when you redid all of that, Eric had you all redo that whole system. That was very helpful because we could look at congestion, economic development, safety issues, and then it really helped us prioritize how we would rank them.
Yes.
And I might refresh.
Thank you.
Or at least help my memory. Back when we ranked all of our projects, I think one of the things we did is says, this is how much money we think we're going to have over the next 10 years. And so you pick your project and your ranking based on what our capacity is going to be. And so that'll be the ultimate goal, is to come out with a 10-year project list that we can afford and we can fund. So it's a great process. And Vice Mayor?
Wonderful process. Wonderful. Do we have a drop dead date on the government raising of the houses? How long is that? Is it 5 years, 10 years?
Army Corps question.
It's an Army Corps question. I talked to William about it. He's hoping to have it all settled out in the next 3 years, is what he said.
Okay.
We don't want to leave this program open forever. But
Right.
They have a list that they're working on, and homeowners are going out and trying to get quotes. And I think it'll get smoother after we get the first 1 or 2 under our belt, which is, we're making progress there.
Alderman Brown.
Sorry, not to harp on this, but I understand when we go through this process, there's going to be the detail and minutia. I get it. I'm still struggling a little bit with the scorecard. I feel like there needs to be a column in this scorecard that talks about the match. Because just on the Harlansdale Bridge and the home raising alone, there's $11 million in matching funds that are adding in the 482. Well, that's 11 million that pays for bicentennial. So on the scorecard, it looks like we're in 11 million more than what we really are. I feel like to have that column dropped in there, what's our responsibility or what's the match, would be
The
a more
city,
accurate reflection of what we're actually looking at
I mean,
on the scorecard.
it's a summary. So when you look at each
understand, but when you're
project, you'll
looking
see
at
the
this-
breakdown.
Well, we're looking at this, and as we're showing this
Yeah.
publicly, it's really not an $11 million home raising. It's a $2 million. Harlansdale Bridge is not a $4 million bridge. It's a $2 million bridge from our perspective, right? I know.
That's the cost of the project.
Right.
We can look at putting in a city funding component.
think it would be
Now, when
relevant.
we do that, it may be 4 different funding sources within that. You know what I mean? Some may be general, some may be parkland, facilities, road impact, whatever, but it'll be, for the purpose of a summary sheet, that maybe give you some context,
But I would rank McEwen. What is it? Your McEwen West Side.
Yeah.
So
We're getting so much of that
We're
from the
getting 12
federal
million.
government.
And we may get more.
But you see what I'm saying? I would rank it.
bring the
Look on it,
projects-
it's $30 million.
When we bring the projects for you to prioritize, we will outline if there is state and federal funding associated with it.
Yep.
What is that amount? You got water, you got sewer.
So we can see
You
that.
got Middle Tennessee electric costs, gas costs. We break it all out to the best of our ability for you to prioritize.
But you're bringing it so we can see that right now we've got 22 million on funding for McEwen 4.
Yeah.
So you'll show that.
Correct.
And you'll show that to all the different projects.
But it's showing
Alderman Black.
47 million,
Well, that's the cost.
Yeah.
but we're not gonna pay 47 million.
No, we're not.
Alderman Blunt.
But it is the cost of the project. You need both.
But if I'm
As we go further down,
You need both.
We need both. We
when
need
it becomes decision-making time, you're going to have a lot more facts to be able,
Yeah.
I know it
But we do
looks
need
weird.
both.
Yeah.
So, a couple of things for me. I wish Jonathan was here because he would smirk. But so, about a year ago, or longer, when you all were elected, we talked about were there any projects that we wanted to come back around and discuss. And for me, and I'm gonna until we have a ribbon cutting, I'm gonna ask us to reconsider Mallory and Royal Oaks and Liberty roundabout. It's funny, and I don't mean to take Pearl after we voted on it because I wish I should said something different. And we've had more opportunity for some of the newer aldermen to see my misgivings about that. I know we're not on the same page there, so we don't have to fight about it. But I would love to see that discussed more. I keep getting told it's coming back around. So I would love to see that back on the projects we'd like to rediscuss instead of projects that are in design. Because I got the climate from the rest of the board that was something they'd like
Well,
to.
you're going to have that opportunity on that project specifically because we
Okay.
need to have some discussion around how it lays out and its impact on adjacent property owners.
Right.
So that's happening naturally as we look at that.
But you understand,
Part
when
of
I
what
like
we'll-
them, when I see it on that list and not that, I'm like,
Well, but that's where it is in the process. It's in design, and that
Gotcha.
helps us understand the project better. One of the things we will also show you is some of the context of how it functions and works. It's not just a matter of the cost, it's also about a matter of how it compares to a traditional intersection versus what this design looks like.
Well, and I'm
which
not-
was part of the context of the decision the board made.
I understand, but
several years
even after that, there were a lot of citizens that were like, oh my gosh, I had no idea this was happening in that general vicinity that I just feel like we might need to just kind of open it up.
Well, that'll be part of that.
Understood.
It's part of reaching out to the impacted neighbors as well as giving you an updated look at it in the context of the whole project. So that's kind of happening on that project, sort of parallel to this broader reconsideration or update of the capital investment.
And I
So it's
appreciate
kinda
that
happening together.
clarification.
Yeah.
The other thing, and this might be helpful to you all, it's almost taking a step backwards, and it may can be done digitally, but in the old days, we would get those CIP books, and they had tabs for each of the categories, but there would be a page for each capital project,
Yep.
and it gave you all those details. It gave you maps, it gave you a picture, it gave you funding mechanisms, and it's almost like deal-a-meal, if you will. I mean, you're able to look at all the projects side by side within its,
We need
you know,
that. We have
that
to
might
have
be helpful for you all
We're getting
to
that.
have that. I know it's another book and we don't look
We
at
need
books,
that.
but it's great to be able to have that to refer back to.
Rather than
it
just a
numbers the
screen.
projects and it's a great way to stay organized.
Yeah, rather than just a screen.
Yes.
Because that book, Brandy's absolutely right, that is.
It's a 3-ring binder.
How about something really entertaining now? Road impact fee study update.
So, not unrelated, the impact fees help us pay for improvements, especially to our transportation network. And so we wanted to take you through an update. We do a periodic update of impact fees, of roadway impact fees. And we were at that stage. We've had a review. We wanted to touch base with the board initially before we engage a broader engagement with stakeholders across the community. And so this is an opportunity to give you that overview of where we are and the basic content that we have that we're ready to work with you and the community in evaluating this and moving forward with the opportunity to consider an update to the roadway impact fees. So take it away, team.
Thank you, Eric. Well, again, I want to apologize. I know you received a couple pieces of information here today. One was a technical report from our second consultant and the presentation that we put together. And the purpose of the meeting as Eric said, is to introduce to you what the consultants recommend for updating the road impact fees. And then that will allow us to go do some outreach to certain stakeholder groups over the next couple months, and then come back to you in the fall for more formal consideration, and as necessary, bring one or both of the consultants back to talk in more detail about it. So the purpose of this afternoon's presentation is to give you that overview. I also want to take this opportunity to introduce you again to David Diaz, who's our contract administrator. And David works on a lot of the development agreements, capital project contracts agreements, and special assignments like this. Facilitating dialogue between two independent consultants required some special attention, and we wanted David, Paul and I wanted David to come before you to share, his involvement. Paul will talk about more of the technical aspects of what's being recommended and how we arrived at that. So take it away.
Good evening. Thank you, Vernon. So we thought this would be a really good opportunity to not only showcase the new study that was performed for the road impact fees, but also run a quick primer over not only what a road impact fee is for our general public, but also the history of road impact fees as it relates to our city. So, so with that, for the sake of discussion, I'll dive into what exactly a road impact fee for the general public here. A road impact fee is a commonly used mechanism that is implemented by local governments to assess new developments for the privilege of utilizing existing city-owned infrastructure and increasing capacity on city capital assets. That's a mouthful there, but really what it boils down to is it's really managing, it's a strategy to manage growth in what it is commonly known as a fiscally responsible way to go ahead and implement that. So there are a couple ways to approach this if we focus on the legal framework. Of course, naturally, courts have opined on road impact fees. They've provided cities with guidance on the parameters on the implementation of such fees. As such, we, as a city, abide by the legal concept that is known as rational nexus. And really, what the rational nexus is it's a rational and definable benefit for between the fee and the development that is taking place that is related to that fee. And that's an important point to mention as we go forward, not only in the new study, but also in the history, is because that is our, how shall I say, that's our North Star. That is the way that we navigate road impact fees in a legally advisable way. And so I'll focus on that first point right below legal framework. Really what that is the rational approach. The fee must be proportional to the capacity need created by the development. And so I know that we're all familiar with different classifications of developments and how they generate varying needs for capacity. And the application of such fees are driven in part by that classification, otherwise known as a land use. The second category there under the legal framework there is the definable benefit. So a fee must be exacted and must benefit the development. And we'll go into this a little bit in the next slide, but what we use is proximity to satisfy that definable benefit in the quadrants. And so I'll get into that in just a moment. If you would advance to the next slide, please. So under this, just a really brief whirlwind timeline on road impact fees and how the city has used them in the past. In 1987, the city sought and obtained authority from the Tennessee legislature to basically ask permission to enact road impact fees. The subsequent year, we went ahead and launched and utilized our first road impact fee schedule and moved forward with that. Since 1988, we have approved 6 road impact fee studies since then. But what I will do in the coming bullet points there is really highlight just a couple items that are relevant to our discussion today on the new study. So in 2014, the city launched a new study to differentiate between collector roads and arterial roads. And so that's important there because what we did was really get into the nuance on the specifics behind collectors and arterials that required a little bit more data gathering. And so what we did was we refined our fees in accordance with that information. But the most important point out of that 2014 study is that we only applied arterial road fees in our fee schedule. Now, jumping forward to 2017, what we did was we performed an update to the 2014 study, which placed an emphasis on the collector roads. So we started to go ahead and implement that on the also have a differentiation between collector roads and arterial roads. Under there, we really focused on the arterial roads under that fee schedule. So jumping forward to 2020, what we did was most recently, and really the crux of our conversation today, is that we launched and commissioned a new study to understand where we were in relation to road impact fees and really get a general understanding of what the market looks like. And really the takeaway point under the newest study is the fact that we, for the first time ever, utilized two separate consultants to fully understand and stress test our understanding and our key assumptions going into that. And so that's a notable item to mention because, again, we've never done that in the past. So in the next coming slides, we'll have our city engineer go ahead and touch on the takeaways under the newest study.
So this slide shows you the current fee schedule and what is being proposed or being calculated as the updated fee schedule. And what they use is what is called the consumption-based model. They simply charge new development the cost of replacing the capacity that it consumes on the major roadway system. So when you develop, you have trips, and those trips take up capacity on the roadway, and there is a cost to that capacity. And the formula is fairly simple. It's a lot of data points that we have to put together, and it really just is, the fee is what it is as far as what does it cost us to build some of those projects. So if you notice, you'll look at this and say, a lot of the arterial fees have doubled. Some of the collector fees have gone down, and you may say, why is that? Well, in the 2014 study, in every study prior to that, all 6 of them, there was limited information on the traffic data on many of our collector roads or even some of our arterial roads. But on the collector roads, we didn't have a lot of that traffic data. And so what the consultant had to do was he was forced to make educated assumptions on a lot of the traffic data. And what it has revealed is this year, we knew that this was going into it. I worked with our traffic engineer to collect traffic data on every single segment of our collector roads. And what it ultimately does is it changes the proportionate share of what should be billed to arterials versus collector. The overall fee was fine. We were just overcharging a little bit historically on collectors and undercharging a little bit on arterials based on the information we have. This study is much better because this year we had traffic data on every single collector road. So moving to the next slide, what we did is also just take a look at what the National Highway Construction Cost Index has done and just kind of applied that to the 2014 fee. And what happens is you end up pretty close, not exact, with what the consultants are proposing now, but it just shows you what has happened in the market, why some of our estimates back in the day were low and now they're extremely high. And what we're doing on future CIP projects is we're trying to take into the consideration this construction inflation. And if it takes 4 or 5 years to get to construction, we apply it. But this just shows you the huge jump that we have encountered in construction costs. And yeah, in 2014, it was 1.67, now it's 2.786.
Yes.
Do you want to handle the conclusion?
I can go ahead and touch on the really the final takeaways for the 2023 study. So, as Paul was really implying there, the 2020 study indicates that the current fee structure falls short of the required funds to keep pace with pressing infrastructure needs. That was the primary takeaway of that study. And so really, the increased cost and the fees that are proposed under the 23 study would allow us to proportionally distribute the burden and also, I would say, the privilege of that development. And I think the final note that I'll mention from the study is the fact that due diligence was performed, right? We approached two separate consultants to not only do the underlying study, but also pressure test that study. And so we used, I may have mentioned it earlier, we used Duncan and Associates and also Alfred Benish Engineering. And so we stand by that and also support that as a staff. And so one of the items I'll mention is the fact that we would like to retain some intellectual humility as we approach that, knowing that we did do due diligence on this. We still would like to, and if you would advance to the next point there, really keeping an open mindset on what the public needs on that space. So, and if you'd like, I could go ahead and cover.
Yeah, let me just chime in 1 second. If you read the Duncan report, you'll notice it's different from some of the fees that we're proposing. And you're asking why. It's because after Duncan completed the report, we asked Benish to do a quality control check of it. And while every number lined up they were in agreement on, the difference is Benish took a larger sample size of projects to determine what that fee should be, while Duncan took a very small list. And ultimately, what we concluded is the larger sample size is going to get us better results that are more accurate. Whether that's up or down, that would be the case. And ultimately, they did come back with a higher number. I believe Duncan would generally be in agreement with that. We also did that too with, there's a state credit and a reimbursement where we looked, instead of a short 4 or 5 years, we tried to look more like 10 years of what federal funding we'd have. So, but I'll turn it back to you, David.
That's right. So really the recommended next steps that we're proposing to you tonight is the engagement process, in approaching the various stakeholders that are outside of the organization. The Design Professionals Group, the Development Services Advisory Commission, and also the Commercial Real Estate Development Association. And so that's something that we would propose to you all to either approve or provide additional refinement on that engagement process. If there are other interested parties or other stakeholders, of course, we're obviously open to that as well. So, and again, Paul, if you'd like to cover any kind of the implementation options that we'd like to have.
So we'll get a lot of feedback from the design professionals, these various groups, but we'll look to figure out a reasonable implementation timeframe and schedule. The fact of the matter is right now we're not collecting as much funding as we should be. If you are wanting to try, and remember, we're asking them to pay for the capacity they consume. So right now we are undercharging based on the numbers that are provided in this last report. The other item is to try to avoid that in future years. We want to tie it to the National Highway Construction Cost Index. And if that number continues to climb, so will the fee. But if that number crashes, the fee will go down with it. And we would recommend that we look at that as an option as well. With that said, we're happy to answer any questions that you have.
Alderman Brown. Go ahead, Mr.
Yeah,
Stuckey, if
just
you-
do a quick addition. In addition to the public engagement piece, we will circle back with the board. We will also bring the consultant in for some more detailed presentation. They were unavailable tonight, but we really looked at this as sort of a kickoff with the process with you. And so they'll be able to provide that too, along with feedback we get from some of these other stakeholders. So I just wanted to add that to the discussion.
First of all, nice job. Well done. Question about, maybe this goes to the two-part test, but do we or do any municipalities ever look at infill and redevelopment versus greenfield? The impact is surely very, very different. I think we're going to see more infill and redevelopment in our community than we are going to see greenfield for sure. Well, I propose that we probably as we go forward. So, and I think it becomes harder when you drop a development in the middle of an already existing area that's stressed as it is. There's only so much reach that is going to have, but the implications can be further. So do we look at the nexus differently? Do we look at the cost differently? Has anybody ever done it that way?
There's a netting, right, of the existing use to the proposed use, but go ahead and walk through that.
That's an awesome question, and that's the type of takeaway that we want to glean from yourselves and the various meetings we have. But as you know, we did send out the survey to yourselves and the Planning Commission, and next month we'll come back and present those findings. Because these fees, as David and Paul had mentioned, are predicated on the cost of increasing capacity to arterial and collector roads, real cost. And that development, whether it's infill or greenfield, is going to generate so much traffic. They're paying that fee. How we use it is entirely up to the board, capital project. The survey will allow us to have a developer perhaps make those improvements, which then ideally, and what we know would be done at a lesser cost than if the city was responsible for making the improvement through a capital project. And that data can be put into future costs of increasing capacity. Now, I don't know if that answers your question, but when you're in an infill development, there's only so much capacity on existing roadways that we're going to be able to achieve, which is part of that survey discussion as far as expanding infrastructure, whether or not we can acquire additional right-of-way. And when you're in the built environment, the likelihood is that right-of-way is more costly, which then translates back into costs of.
Another facet of that, though, when there's a redevelopment, there's an existing use.
Right.
That existing use has a certain demand on the transportation network. That is factored in compared to the new use. So it sort of nets out against each other. So that's another kind of facet to how we look at what was there, but what's proposed to go there in its place, the redevelopment concept, so they sort of net out against each other. And there likely is a higher demand, typically. If you go from a surface parking lot to structured parking and development above, you've probably created additional demand overall, but we do give credit for the demand that was there previously, if that helps.
And that is also for sewer and water impact fees. If you have an existing use, but then some redevelopment occurs to a more intense use, then we'd only charge the difference from what was existing to what's being proposed.
Go ahead, Alderman Berger.
Oh, okay, just to add on to that, Matt, is, for example, I think a good example of that infill would be Eastworks, because they have that large building over there that Ford Credit Union had, and at full capacity, they have like 2 football fields of parking over there. So they're getting rid of all that runoff and all that parking. And if you take a look at when that building was at full capacity, how many people were coming and going major times in the morning, major times in the afternoon, but with Eastworks, you've got a mixed-use development, so your traffic flow is like that. It's all times of the day, a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit more here, maybe more concentration. So it all sort of pans out, and also their impact fees and what we've required them to do is put in more turn lanes. There's connectivity through Meridian already, so they can have that connectivity to go down to restaurants, go out at that light, go out at the Eastworks light, the new one they'll put in. All those things work together. So that's really, I think, a good example that Matt brought up. How does that pan out? How does that look for redevelopment?
Yep.
And that's, you can't widen so much. I mean, we already have a 4-lane road, 5-lane road in some areas in Carruthers with turn lanes and everything. But, you've got all that development along there, so you're not going to expand the roadway, but you also are going to put in some, out of the road impact fees, you're going to be putting in turn lanes and things. So I just thought that was a good example.
Another example might be the project that we approved in Cool Springs at McEwen, where we were looking at the impact and more, what is it, a mile radius or so of what it took to increase the capacity. So, anybody else? Alderman Baggett.
Good job, David. The whole team.
Absolutely.
But great presentation. The larger sample size that Banesh used, did it have more outlying or like larger outlying projects that would have skewed. I mean, just look at that, because I think, you have a couple of projects that were bigger projects that they included that the other did not. And that bumped up that, the numbers up on that one. I mean, I think, look at that fairly up.
We did, and we honestly removed it to
Some of
see
those
outliers.
outliers.
It made very little difference.
Good.
But we did look at that.
The other thing is a big difference to the whole formula is the state and federal funding credit. It's a 40% decrease over the assumption in 2014. That's a huge deal on this calculation, at least. That how you come up with the fee. It's assuming that we're going to get 38% less federal and state funding credit. I don't understand. Full disclosure, I don't know it exactly all that where those credits come into the house, but it clearly goes into the formula. Like what motivated that, or how did you come up with the 38% less?
What we did is we looked at the last 5 years, I believe 5 years, of federal funding we've received. We also then looked at what federal funding we would receive that next 5 years. And basically.
And you went out longer, you said, too, didn't
We
you?
went out, yeah. So it's much longer sample size. The 2014 study, I believe they double counted some things. And that was an error on the consultant's part of misinterpreting the tip. Ultimately, it didn't have a huge impact while looking at it, but this is, the way we have done it now is extremely accurate.
I believe it, and I would also, because the state just passed a transportation bill as well, that I don't know where in, that was done this summer. I don't know where in the scheme this study was done in relation to that transportation bill. And I don't know what that transportation bill might do for us, but I do know that there is, supposedly they say, more funds coming to the local level for projects. I don't know, but it all goes into our fee calculation. And if we're using some assumptions that don't include that, we could be overcharging.
Yeah. Again, we looked at history 5 years, and then working with Jonathan Marston, who does a lot of the grants through the MPO and works directly with the MPO. They have a physically constrained transportation improvement plan, and we looked at what is included on that and what can we expect.
So
That's how we ultimately came.
But was the transportation bill passed when this was done? Probably not.
I don't think we have a full answer to that, because
But
I don't think
well,
it's
just look into
clear.
it.
I don't think it's clear what what's going to be eligible.
But here's what we're looking at. January the 1st, we're going to start charging people a fee based off 38% reduction in this credit, and that does flow into the actual fee we're charging.
It's a little bit of an unknown, but it's also, you look at the projects themselves and what is likely to be eligible. Say Moore Local Road is not going to get federal funding. It's just not going to happen.
Right.
But like
But
Columbia
maybe-
Avenue, we're able to leverage federal money at 80%, state money at 20%, and we've got a project.
And how many of our arterials are state roads?
But that's very rare.
I don't know the exact number. There's
A lot of
there's
them.
handful.
A majority of Columbia, Franklin Road, most MacHatcher, they're all state roads. So I do think
But there's
it's
a lot of
important.
others in the network that are not.
That are not. I
It's-
agree.
It's not.
There's Mallard.
The whole point is we're trying. I guess I see this. Our role is like is that we want. I don't want to overcharge.
Right. We're trying to
You
be
don't wanna
as
undercharge.
accurate as we can.
To be totally honest with you, if we somehow have a windfall of additional money, we should go back and revisit this.
I agree.
But right now, this is the best estimate
That you got.
coming from
Yep.
the Nashville area MPO, and we're also looking at the last 5 years of what did we actually receive.
I think because everything looks great. I think that is the biggest question mark. That when I was reading this, that really is just uncertain, and we're charging for some level of uncertainty.
Yep.
The next thing, big picture view, we're looking at a lot of impact fees. How all these work together. I mean, I think us taking a deep breath and seeing how our sewer, and by the way, congratulations on not being as high as the sewer and water impact fees percentages.
It costs what it costs.
It costs what it costs. I know, but the percentages came in much lower. But I do think we look like as we think about this as a community and how all these are going to collectively impact development that is existing, planned, going through the process. I think looking at it together, and maybe Eric looks like he's got something teed up, ready to go.
No,
or
you're
maybe
good.
I
Yep.
said so.
I got it teed up. If you don't put it on the developer, it goes on the tax bill.
Well, I understand, but
Yeah.
Well, we can have that conversation. If you you also can kill development when you increase things by 400% and you cause people to go belly up. I'm not interested in causing anyone by these decisions to go belly up.
Right.
And that is a real possibility with some of the fees that we've looked at over the last 6 months. We've seen those examples. So, of course, I want development to pay this way, but there's a level of fairness as well, too. So I would like to see all of that. I think we're going to hear it. When you meet with these fine institutions, commercial, NAIOP, and all the rest, you're going to hear it, and I'd like to see it as well. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Mayor, one final statement. When we, as I put in the memorandum, Duncan Associates was originally hired by the city back in the 80s, and many of you know some of those folks that came and helped. One of the conditions or deliverables that we put in that is that they spent time with us, so we understood the methodology and the data much deeper. And Paul has briefly illustrated that, and compliments to Paul for really diving into it. And then on top of that, we've asked Benish to look at that data, because this is a data-heavy driven formula on cost of construction, essentially, and the material costs that go into roads. So if things happen to change, I'm bringing this up to give you the confidence that Paul understands this much, much deeper than we have previously, because we wanted to take the time, and even David, that didn't know much about road impact fees, probably knows more than he ever thought he would by now, too.
Making him an expert.
So thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll report back.
Good job. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go to items 6, 7, and 8. Ordinance 2023-22 to rezone 2.906 acres from Regional Commerce R6 District, Plan PD 61.3 per 3,362 district for the property located east of Mack Hatcher Memorial Parkway, north of Cool Springs Boulevard, and a development plan for the same property, same address.
That's it. Those two.
Oh,
6 and
just,
7. Yeah.
okay, I'm sorry.
Yep, no problem.
Yeah, 8, 9, and 10 are.
8, 9, and 10 are together. Yep.
Thank you. I am going to, mine's a little long-winded, so bear with me. And then I'll have Paul and Vernon add anything that they see fit on the traffic front. The applicant is requesting to rezone the property from Regional Commerce RC6 to Plan District PD 61.3 3,362 to accommodate a proposed development plan for 101 Cool Springs Boulevard. Development has been submitted concurrently, and Envision Franklin places this property in the regional commerce design concept. The proposed development, as I stated, consists of 178 multifamily units and approximately 3,400 square feet of commercial space, which does meet the minimum recommendations of Envision Franklin by providing a mix of uses, both commercial and multifamily residential. The amount of activated ground floor commercial use is very minimal, like approved developments nearby. The site layout provides an urban feel with building-lined streets, creating a walkable development, and provides architecture that fits with the style of the corridor. The regional commerce design concept supports a mix of uses, and the uses proposed are supported within this design concept. With that said, a better mixture of uses is allowed within the existing RC6 zoning district could help facilitate an improvement in projected traffic flows by dispersing traffic onto Cool Springs Boulevard at different peak times of day. While the proportion of multifamily to commercial space is consistent with approved projects adjacent to the property, the transportation infrastructure does not support the proposed mixture of uses, which is predominantly multifamily residential with peak traffic volumes projected at similar times of day. Envision Franklin directs growth in areas where existing or planned infrastructure can support the proposed uses, and the uses proposed with the development plan place so much strain on the existing transportation infrastructure that minimum traffic requirements cannot be met. The 101 Cool Springs development has submitted their final version of their TIA in accordance with the City of Franklin's TIA guidelines.
There were studied intersections that did not meet our overall level of service D, and individual movements that had delays worse than the level of service E. Thus, there are intersections and movements that did not meet city standards. Mitigation was not recommended for the Cool Springs at McEwen intersection, which is showing the greatest amount of excessive delay in the study. The intersection fails to an overall level of service F with the development. The added vehicular trips of this and adjacent developments in the area further increase traffic along Cool Springs Boulevard and this area in general. The intersection of Cool Springs Boulevard at Mallory Lane and Mallory Lane at McEwen were outside the study area. Any development in this area increases traffic at these intersections as discussed during the Optima development, adding to existing excessive vehicle delays. It should be noted that the current TIA guidelines are being discussed with the board, and the TIA requirements are anticipated to be adjusted as a result of these discussions. It's unknown at this time if the adjustments would bring the affected intersections of the development into meeting the future TIA standards. The Planning Commission recommends to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen to disapprove both the Ordinance 2023-22 of the rezoning and Resolution 2023-42 of the development plan by a vote of 6-1. Thank you. This concludes my presentation.
Joe's going to chime in and then let Vernon chime in if you'd like to, but
correct.
Yeah, one of the reasons for the recommendation of disapproval is engineering meeting with planning and talking with the department review team. Really comes down to the fact that in that existing zoning, the RC6, it can be partially multifamily, please correct me if I'm wrong, but it shouldn't occupy more than 40% of the overall building. As we're not opposed to development, we're not opposed to density, but as we develop it, we feel it should be done smart. There should be more of a mixture of uses with all of these developments. And what you're seeing is some of these intersections failing, and I'll be the first to tell you, they're not terrible failures that we're seeing. It's not above that 160-second cycle, but there will be the next development and the next development. And what you're going to hear is probably, we're only adding this amount to this intersection. That's all we're doing. But we're not getting any improvements. They're going to make some safety improvements, but no major traffic improvements, because there's nothing that you can do at these intersections without major drastic change. And so we're really recommending more complying with the existing zoning and having a mixture of uses versus being, and I don't know the exact number, but it is almost 99% multifamily. And over the last few years with Artesa, Optima, the Haven, the View, I mean, adding this on, it's about 1,000 units of multifamily we're approving in this area. So that's really where the discussion went with the DRT between engineering, planning, and the rest of the team. And I don't know, Vernon, if you have anything to add.
No,
otherwise.
thank you, Chelsea and Paul. An excellent job in the report. And I just want to reinforce where we're at, because we've talked and we have performed that survey that will help us work with yourselves and the Planning Commission to adjust the TIA guidelines. That is the standard that we look at to provide a staff recommendation. Ultimately, as we continue to grow it as the city, and Paul really hit on it, existing zoning districts allow for the development of the property. As Paul mentioned with this property, having more mixture uses will reduce the peak hour traffic that's contributing to the failure of intersections. At some point in time, and we've already started to have that conversation, there are no improvements to be made to existing intersections, so we're just building the level of delay. That essentially is growth management. And while a property owner, a developer, looking to invest in our community, we want to help them with that. There are a multitude of uses within our zoning district under each zoning district of permitted uses that will allow for the development to occur. Rezoning should be done very thoughtfully, which is the responsibility of the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, that if it increases more density, increases more vehicular trips, likely at peak hour times, which then impacts those intersections. Hopefully over the next few months, it is intended that we come back again, as I mentioned, with the survey results and some recommendations to adjust those TIA guidelines where appropriate. Thank you.
Mr. Gamble had requested to talk about this. I see he has a handout, so go ahead, if it's okay with the board for him to go ahead and give his 3.5 minute.
I'll turn my microphone on. As you all know, we have been working on this as a design team for several months. We've had 2 joint conceptual workshops to get input and feedback from the Planning Commission and the board and mayor and aldermen. This is not something new in the conversation. Here tonight with Jason Ritson, who's the owner of this property, but also the developer of Aspen Grove Medical. And there's not a lot of conversation going on in our presentation, honestly, but also the staff report about the relationship between residential and existing commercial uses that are already there. Cool Springs Boulevard is a mixed-use corridor. This is a mixed-use building. It does have commercial on the ground floor that we are proposing, but it's also complementary to other businesses that are here in the area. In Envision Franklin, it identifies this property as having a 6-story height. We presented our first plan showing a 6-story building. This is a lot more square footage than what you're seeing today. We're presenting to you today a boutique building and a boutique development. This was received a lot of objection for 6 stories adjacent to Roper's Knob, right on Mac Hatcher, and we were asked to go back to the drawing board. This site could be a 6-story building today by right. It could be a 6-story hotel. It could be a 6-story office building. It could be a use with less traffic impacts. But at a 3-story office building, it has more impacts than what we're about to propose to you today that you're going to review. So I think it's a bit subjective to say, hey, a different plan or different uses could result in different traffic impacts, because that is a true statement. It could be something else. It could be a car wash. And it would have different impacts throughout the day to the traffic impacts. There's no doubt about that. We are proposing something, though, that, in our opinion, is very complementary to what has recently been approved at Haven, that is complementary to the 3-story office buildings that exist along Mac Hatcher today, and is complementary to the Aspen Grove Medical Building. This is, as it's been pointed out multiple times, the last piece of property on Cool Springs Boulevard. If you look here at the master plan, it shows its relationship to the previously approved plans. But what's more important, and what we've been more quick to understand, is that the elevations and the architecture are more important than the footprint and more important to the relationship to the context of what's around it and adjacent to it. This is the elevation of a 3-story building along Mac Hatcher Parkway. Right on the hard corner of Mac Hatcher and Cool Springs, we have a fitness club accessed for the residents that are within the building. That's to activate that hard corner of Cool Springs, but also do it in a respectful way, in a way that really elevates the design of the corner and the architecture of the building. As we transition up Cool Springs, then we go from a 3-story building to a 4-story building. This property happens to sit higher in elevation than Haven. So Haven, even though it's 6 stories tall, is going to sit with a lower finished floor elevation along Cool Springs Boulevard. I provided a few floor plans and elevations of the garages, but I'd like to, because I don't have a lot of time, I'd like to pass those by. If you'll go to this elevation here, this shows the 3-story elevation transition to a 4-story elevation with 6-story Haven directly next door. Without what we're proposing, if you don't have this kind of context adjacent to Haven, Haven is really going to feel out of character on Cool Springs Boulevard. It's going to feel as though it is the eyesore. When we can transition down Cool Springs Boulevard from Mac Hatcher in a respectful and really responsible way with the right architectural design. If you flip to this page here that shows the relationship of our proposed 3-story building adjacent to Roper's Knob, you will see that we are at a height of 229 feet below Roper's Knob, and that was an important aspect to both joint conceptual workshops that we presented at. There have been, this This is a perspective rendering provided by the architect that shows really the full context of what you would experience along Cool Springs Boulevard, and we think that's important to show as well. We've had some questions about multifamily as a use. I provided you a table here that takes the existing PUDs, what's approved right now in Cool Springs and in Berry Farms, and the commercial uses, which include office, hotel, retail, and restaurant that are approved in these PUDs but not yet constructed, will equate to 38,800 jobs. Based upon that, and the current ratios of people who currently commute into Franklin, we're looking at an increase from 70,100 commuter trips per day to our Cool Springs and Berry Farms area, up to 109,000 commuter trips per day based upon current percentages of how many people commuted into Franklin. That's based upon our 2020 census. Apartments allow us to internalize those trips in the Cool Springs area. I provide you with this 8.5 by 11 that shows the major intersection of concern, which is at the intersection of West McEwen Drive and Cool Springs Boulevard. This proposed development adds 3.9 seconds in the PM peak hour to this intersection. The Planning Commission was reluctant to recommend approval because they didn't want to set a precedence of approving developments that created or caused failing intersections. But they may not have been aware that Orium, Vintage Franklin, McEwen Town Center, Eastworks, Avalon, Ovation, and Chadwell have all been approved with failing intersections already by the board, mayor, and aldermen, by the city. A lot of those have been recommended for approval by the Planning Commission. 3.9 seconds is what we're discussing. The current full projected build out, once everything's built out in Cool Springs, it will be at 79.5 seconds. 79.5 seconds is projected by the traffic engineers. We're adding 3.9 seconds. With or without this development, you have a condition that is on the fringe of being a failing intersection, with or without it. We know that traffic distribution throughout the day and on a Wednesday or a Tuesday could be different. Traffic engineers do their best to make assumptions that give us the best predictability. 3.9 seconds is what we're adding to this intersection. We believe that our plan that we have presented responds to both joint conceptual workshops, the information we've heard from the Planning Commission, the information that we've had from the board and mayor and aldermen. Design a building that fits the context. We have to take Haven in a 6-story building into consideration when we're talking about context. We have to take the 3-story buildings that are on Mac Hatcher and the Aspen Grove Medical building into consideration when we're talking about context. And we believe this building responds to that. And we're happy to answer any questions. I know Jason is happy to answer any questions if you have for him as well. Was that 3 minutes?
Exactly. Alderman Blanton.
I remember actually 12 years ago, this was something that we started to talk about when I first got reelected, this piece of property. And it's coming back now for development. I told Greg and the applicant that the medical building to me is 1980s. Like, to me, it almost needs to be covered up just because of the way it is. I mean, no offense, but yes. But, you know, to me, my sticking points are that by right, he can build something that's even more massive than what has been offered here. And the idea that it does blend with what is already proposed to be built there. I think that we all have been down this path, and I have been at the front of the line, I know Bev has too, with do we have too many apartments coming down the pike? And when you look at the studies and you think about the people that are moving into here, I'm of a mind that, you know, we're looking at 275 potentially on Liberty Pike. How can you say that's appropriate, but it's not appropriate in other, and I'm not pitting one against the other. That's just the most recent apartment opportunity that we're discussing. I think we talk about, and I felt like I said this 2 weeks ago, you talk about where it's appropriate to have density, and it is in a corridor that is away from the Mac-Hatcher loop. I can support this, and I know that I understand that there's been some back and forth as to whether this is the popular choice. The other thing that I will bring up is I think that we have to look forward to when this TIA study comes back out. If we're increasing it, it's almost like, are we talking about this project and denying it on the traffic study of 3.9 seconds prematurely? Maybe that's something to consider. If it doubles to 80 to 160, then this is well within the range of a failing intersection. Cool Springs is dense by design. It's a different beast. The other thing that I will bring up, and I'm not sure that it is going to be here to stay, is you talk about residential and the traffic that it puts on in rush hour. Very few people are working in offices anymore. So I almost think that rule of thumb, we have to really consider whether that's something to hang our hat on. That being office, we have empty office buildings all over the place. And where residential more would talk about peak times of coming and going, I don't think that's necessarily the case today. So I can support this, but I also wonder if we need to wait and see what the traffic TIA count. I always think about transient ischemic attack, totally different acronym, but see what that's going to bring into the fray.
Mr. Girth, did you want to?
Yeah, and Alderman Bland, those are excellent points. That choice is yours, whether to wait, as Paul had mentioned during the road impact fee presentation. We're getting more actual data by doing counts on roadways and trying to understand the trend post-COVID of what's happening with workers. But I saw an advertisement in the paper just recently that showed a property in Franklin. It said, by right 12-story building. And I want to be clear that while the zoning and our land use plan allows for certain heights, by right also requires compliance with our TIA guidelines. And that's what we've been trying to bring forth to you, that this is, and Chelsea articulated it quite nicely, that it doesn't comply. It's impacting these failing intersections. And this isn't the last one that's going to come, but we've been bringing it forward. We understand that Jason, wants to develop that property like the other properties are. But I want to, going forward, as we talk about by right, we also have to think about the impact that it's going to have on our road network, too.
But I would debate, if you look, and it's not been built out yet, you look at Ovation in the beginning, not today. I remember, because I had to practice it to quote it, because I was like, oh, that's mind-boggling, that Ovation was going to bring, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I learned this one, 70,000 new day trips to that corridor. Oh my gosh, 70,000, which meant we were going to have to add like lanes to the interstate exits on both sides. I'm telling you, isn't that what was tossed around?
Pretty much, yeah. What was presently when we did that integrated study, what was on
seriously
on I-65?
So you have to look through my lens too when you think about what it does. When I know that was the acme of where we even were discussing when that came into play. 70,000 new day trips. Now, is that really relevant today? I don't know. Is the use going to change in the way that's developed? But so I think we also know that there's some opportunities happening in that area too that would lend itself to people who want to walk more and people who want to go maybe use some parkland and things there, and that trail system's already there. So it's like, in my opinion, you penalize the person who was last to the dance, but the person who had the property before anybody else. That's old school small community stuff. Sorry, but I it's that fairness that we talk about, what's fair and what's right. But at the same time, we make rules for people to follow within. But I think we need to figure out what the TIA is going to do. Because I think y'all would understand that it's not breaking the bank like it looks like today.
Alderman Berger.
Well, I hear you, and I think a long time ago they said, oh my gosh, we're going to have to add Matt Catcher. Oh my gosh, we're going to have to add another 2 lanes to I-65. Oh my gosh, we're going to have to build a road called Cool Springs. And, you know, if we go back far enough, that's exactly what happens. So I'm not so worried about Ovation coming in, because we are going to have to do something with the exit lanes there and the entrance lanes, and we're going to have to build, those are going to still have to be built. And the good thing about Ovation, though, getting to yours in a minute, is that, and this all sort of marries each other, it all goes along, because this is the discussion we're having. It's a hop, skip, and a jump off the interstate. So if you have activities there and you've got a lot of pull-in from the outside area, the other residents around, you pull them in, you're right there. You're not driving through neighborhoods. You're not driving way down Cool Springs or way down, you know, into subdivisions and stuff. So there's something to be said about that. The oh my gosh is yeah, that happens, and we have to deal with it. My heartburn is apartments. You bring me for sales, I'm all for it all day long. My heartburn just gets into this horrible thing about all these rentals, more rentals. I love the design. I think you did a phenomenal job with that and the placement and how it looks and everything. But the apartments at Liberty and Franklin that are coming in, maybe, you know, I've heard this mantra all the time from the downtown people since I was elected. We want more residential downtown. We want more residential downtown. Golly, we're getting it on the cusp of downtown, and everybody's freaking out now because there's residential. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is the mantra I've heard for years, and now we're going to deal with that. So dense by design, you're right, Randy, Cool Springs is dense by design. So are downtowns. Downtowns are dense by design. I'm not so worried about residential traffic at all, because it is a different animal today. And also, if you had office and you had retail there, that's a whole different ball game. And the flow, even at Liberty Pike and Franklin Road, the flow of residential, it is so minute compared to all the other retails and commercials and things of that nature. But again, I have to go back to my heartburn is always the apartments. That's my thing. But I think your design looks great, and I think it also levels out as you step it down towards Matt Catcher. I think it's really well designed. So help me with my heartburn. I don't know how you can do that.
Ready to keep moving? Alderman Potts.
I feel a little obligated to chime in on this one because I feel like I'm the one that beats the drum a lot on this intersection in relation to Roper's Knob. And I've got a lot of notes right here, but I think the big one I want to start with right now is you're right. This could be zone 6-story. It is zone 6-story, could be a 6-story structure. And so I do appreciate the fact that this is a 3-story structure closest to the intersection. And the visual aid that was provided right here of 76.1 to 765, I appreciate that right there. I know that is Cool Springs and it is supposed to be dense, but I was on record previously, and I'll say it again, I think that we got the zoning on this one wrong because it's so close to Roper's Knob. And I take responsibility for this, and I probably should have pushed the ball forward at the time, maybe to have it rezoned so that we weren't dealing with that. With that said, though, this is more palatable option compared to what was brought to us before. This was gravely concerning. This is concerning, and I still, as I'm trying to flip through, and I wish we had this on slides, as we look at it on the next one right here, I still get concerned about the landlocked component of this. Is everybody's going to have to funnel in and funnel out, and it's going to be tight. So, those are just a couple of my concerns, but I would like to see the study. I would like to see where it is. It is outside the McHatcher Loop. I don't remember who said that. But that's, that's the other thing. And as we look at apartments and adding more, and your data makes sense, but it also scares a lot of people when we start thinking about how many apartments might be needed in this area. And we have to find that balance of where we're placing them. And this may be that outlying island that remains. But again, I appreciate what's being presented right here. It's still in 15 years or, years down the road, I've got my kids in the car. I still don't want them to be like, wow, Dad, how'd you let that one get through, right? And I don't know that one is as strong as what was previously presented, but those are my thoughts on this.
Alderman Brown?
Still not there yet. But I will say I appreciated the context of the relationship to Haven and the step down. I get that. I get what Haven becomes with something that doesn't do that. So I get that context. Much like Alderman Potts, I probably here's at the core of the issue for me. I probably have a little bit of buyer remorse on a couple of the other ones that we approved because we were looking at those as one-offs, that we didn't really look at the totality of it. But if I start doing that now, if I start thinking about this area and I start thinking about it going forward, across the street is going to do something else. It's going to. 100 Cool Spring, that developed, there's going to be something proposed there. The parking lot's down where Mars Pet was, there's going to be something proposed down there. So this isn't the last piece on Cool Springs. This is the last open piece maybe, but it is by far not the last one. And so the question becomes, where do you stop? Yeah, I feel bad, fourth in, I get it. I feel bad for that. But do you stop at 4? Do you stop at 5? Do you stop at 6? At what point have you just completely overdone this area to the point we can't do anything more? And so to Vernon's point, there's by right, but you couldn't do 6 stories all the way up and down, all the way to 12 stories and do that all the way down Cool Springs. We couldn't, there's no way you could do that. And so to me, I get the context. I want there to be able to be something done here, but at some point we just can't keep putting more and more. And this corner, I think, is even harder. I tell Paul all the time, this is probably the one intersection where road rage comes out in me because I can't stand that people stop at that turn right. But it is a backed up area. It is a frustrating area, and it's only going to get worse. And I don't actually know how you put 178? What is it? I don't know how you put that on that corner. I really don't. So I appreciate the context of Haven. I appreciate the step down. I really do appreciate that, by the way. I so much appreciate that this is respecting Roper's Knob. But it's one more added to 3 prior to what could be 3 or 4 more, and we just don't have the capacity there. And I'm with you. I want to hear the TIA discussion. Maybe that does need to happen. But that's where that's my heartache is. It's not on apartments and for sale necessarily, although I do agree, Alderman Berger, but it is the context of looking forward in this and trying to look at this area as a small area and what the impact is. So,
Vice Mayor.
What is our apartment rate now? How many do we have open? You understand what I'm saying?
Open? Vacancy?
Vacancies, yeah, in the apartments now. I mean, you're looking at 176 here. We're looking at 270 something, units, not necessarily apartments. But I know we keep harping on apartments and vacancy rates and or non-vacancy rates or whatever. And I do find it a little difficult, always have, to think that there's 70 or 80 or 90,000 people that are commuting into Cool Springs in the morning and exiting out in the afternoon, because that is a whole lot of people. So what's the incentive for building the apartment if it's not going to be occupied. I would assume that somebody has done a study on that. They know where they're going on this. They know what the rates are. And so am I concerned about an apartment? I'm not too concerned about an apartment. If somebody wants to live in one, that's their privilege. If they can afford a single family unit, that's also their privilege. So if they want to invest that. So I don't know that we've overbuilt on apartments if we don't know what the vacancy rate is on the ones that we've already built out.
Alderman Berger.
We have 5,000 apartments in the pipeline that have not been built.
Well, that doesn't mean
So-
that they're not going to be occupied.
So 5,000, maybe just under 5,000, still in the pipeline that have not been built, that have been approved. The vacancy rate is, I thought it was like, just under 4% recently.
How much?
I think it's just under 4% recently.
Data.
Where'd you get your data, Alderman Potts?
I just have it in my phone.
Why don't you share it with,
We can get.
C or
Get that.
or.
okay, great.
of the,
Are we ready to move to the next items? I get the okay from the Vice Mayor. We're going to look at items 8, 9, and 10. This has to do with Resolution 2023-49, 48, and 24. It has to do with a plan of service and a referendum for annexation and zoning of property that's at the south of intersection of Paytonsville Road and Pratt Lane.
Thank you. This request for 4436 Pratt Lane is within the Goose Creek Basin and is located outside of the UGB. The subject property is close in proximity to other parcels that were annexed into the city limits over the last several years, and it partially fills in a donut hole created by those past annexations. This annexation cannot occur until a referendum has been held on October 24th, 2023, and the applicant is requesting a zone of estate residential should the plan of service and annexation be approved by BOMA and the referendum for annexation pass. The Planning Commission did recommend, along with staff, to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen to approve the Resolution 2023-49, Resolution 2023-48, and Ordinance 2023-24 by a vote of 7-0. Thank you.
And sort of related to the next item on the agenda, after these three, this is included or anticipated in the updated urban growth boundary for the city.
We'll just keep moving forward and go to item 11, which is Resolution 2023-44, a resolution to recommend changes to the Williamson County Growth Plan to the Williamson County Coordinating Committee established a public hearing on August 8th, 2023.
So we want to give you just sort of an overview of this process and where we are. We've been having discussions around what an update to our urban growth boundaries looks like for the last 2 years, engaging the board, engaging property owners and the community overall. About 4 weeks ago, the official process started with the first meeting of the coordinating committee. And then what we're working collectively on is an overall update of the countywide growth plan, including updates of each individual community's urban growth boundaries. So we're going to walk you through that. Again, these are things you have seen, but talk about that process. We are required to hold public hearings. We have a plan for how those lay out, but want your feedback on the process and anything else as we move forward. So Emily, I think, is going to walk you through that.
Right. So this is very similar to what we talked about at a few meetings ago. Really, from a procedural standpoint, we're here tonight just with the formal resolution drafted, and it's been included in your materials, where you would vote on August 8th to recommend this map. It's the same map you've been seeing. There's no changes to it. Really includes the removal of a few properties off Highway 96 West, some properties down Carter's Creek Pike near South Hall, and then the addition of properties in the Goose Creek Basin. And this is the same map we've been talking about really for the last approximately year that we've refined to this point at your guidance and direction. before August 8th, we will have our first public hearing at the July 27th Planning Commission meeting. That's already been advertised, and then we will hold a second public hearing that's required locally on August 8th before you vote to recommend this map be sent on to the coordinating committee. Planning Commission will take a recommendation vote at their meeting at the end of July, so you'll have that as well when we come back before you on August 8th. Here, if you have any questions, there's not really any new information.
And then the rest of the process will play out over the fall as we bring all the different urban growth boundary updates together to do a collective plan update for the whole county.
We do have a public speaker. If I might invite Dana Frick up.
Under 3 minutes. Absolutely.
2 minutes.
There's
Hit the button.
Thank you. There's a large tract of land referred to as West Harpeth Ranch that is being bundled into the reductions along with Carter's Creek, South Hall, and New Highway 96. And the June 15th staff report states that these reductions will help preserve the rural character of those areas. But in relation to this land that's north of West Harpeth, changing these urban growth boundary lines may not be really consistent with that and actually unfavorable to the current residents. The case in point is the recent upzoning of Garrett Farms off Columbia Pike. Despite the neighborhoods that are to the west, north, and east, which are 1 home per 1 acre, and the pasture land to the south of that, Tennessee Valley Homes sued Thompson Station and bullied them into upzoning from 1 home per 8 acres to 2 homes per 1 acre, and that was on June 16th. And the West Harpeth Ranch property is similar to this very situation in that you've got a large tract of land with neighborhoods north, east, and south that are over 1 acre lots. To the west of the property is an active farm, really pretty lots of corn there now. And keeping this land that's along West Harpeth in the Franklin urban growth boundaries and South Point neighborhood will help preserve the rural character of the area. If this land goes into the Thompson Station urban growth boundary, who is poised to provide sewer in the area, it's not going to preserve that rural growth area. They've set that precedent with Garrett Farms of being able to have developers put money into pressuring them into higher density zoning. So thank you for listening to consider this one little 150-ish acres remaining in Franklin's urban growth boundary. It would be consistent with the properties around it if it stayed with Franklin to oversee rather than being moved to Thompson Station.
Can you point that out?
Yeah, please.
Emily.
All of us were thinking.
You'll have to blow it up.
Emily.
I'm not sure exactly.
You can stand right here if it's easier.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Back. How about the back?
Here, on that back wall.
Okay.
So we can all see it.
We have a pointer.
You need a pointer.
That's what I was about to use. For the briefcase. Can you pull it down a little bit?
So this right here is South Point subdivision.
Can you make it lower for her?
That's as tall as I get.
All right, no. We're gonna lower the map. Hold on. There we go.
There we go. Okay. Columbia Pike, Prison Creek, this is West Harpeth Ranch. So right now, South Point neighborhood is in the Franklin urban growth boundary. This property here is what's under Franklin urban growth boundary now. Thompson Station is here. So by changing this neighborhood and this property of land here, that sets Thompson Station up to put in sewage. They're more teed up, ready to do that. And the Garrett Farm property down here, which will own 1 house, or 8 acres, once Tennessee Valley sued them, they forced them, negotiated into upzoning it into 2 houses per 1 acre, which is inconsistent with this limited area.
Vice Mayor?
Who owns the property that you're talking about?
Yep. Come back to the microphone, please.
Can you say all of that, just summarize it one more, because you weren't near the microphone, public couldn't hear.
Okay, all right. So right now, West Harpeth Ranch, north of that is Franklin Urban Growth Boundary, including an already established South Point neighborhood. If you change this, it was at the request of A1 Builders that owns 150-ish acres there. That means that developer has already been talking with Thompson Station, teeing them up for being able to put sewage into that area. So,
He came and spoke to us,
yeah, he did.
and he didn't say they were
About-
teeing up for sewage.
What we did is
So, and I
we
think we're kinda
denied the
getting into-
sewer is what he came and talked to you. Huntley came and talked to you about denying the sewer. And that's just regular business. So what I'm saying is, we know that Franklin isn't interested in putting out sewage way down there right now. So if the intent here of changing the urban growth boundary lines is to preserve the rural character, staying in Franklin, this property will preserve the urban rural feel. But if you allow this property to move from Franklin to Thompson Station, where they just did upzoning, stone's throw away, from 1.1 house to 8 acres upzoned all the way to 2 houses per 1 acre, I don't think Thompson Station can
Mayor, I have some
defend
question
that.
for staff.
Sure.
Is this parcel included in the Thompson Station urban growth boundary?
We'll have to look at the map to be sure, but it's not my understanding that the Thompson Station urban growth boundary is going to come up all the way to.
That was news to me,
ours.
and I
When-
think that would be
When
that
I
would
talked
be.
to Andrew, he pointed me to their website. I asked him the question
Can staff?
directly.
Can I mean
We will
wanna
verify that. I
verify
don't
that.
believe that's
you.
proposed for their modification, but we will verify
Yeah.
that for you.
So as you move the blue line and the green line, you switch it. That's what you're doing. You're taking that 150 acres West Harpeth Ranch and South Point neighborhood.
We have the maps for the
We will-
county.
we'll verify that
The
with
whole
them.
growth plan, we'll check it out.
Hopefully
and
I'm wrong.
verify it.
Okay. We
Thank
need to
you for your
keep
time.
moving.
But
Thank
just
you.
keep
Yeah.
in mind, even if Thompson Station doesn't annex the property, that doesn't necessarily mean that they can't serve it with sewer. So,
Although part of what we're talking about is agreeing to our urban growth boundaries and living within them collectively. That it doesn't become, that it has some teeth to it, and there's talk about having some interlocals amongst everybody that we live within the urban growth boundaries as defined in this process. Right.
In that case, it would be
So we will
better for you to
we'll
be
verify
out
that.
because then it would be
We'll check
1 per 5 acres. If
Yeah,
if
if it
you
stays in
had
the
the
county.
teeth, if you had the teeth in the interlocal agreement, then it'd be better. Anyway, I think we just need some more
Yeah,
information.
we'll verify that.
yeah, there's also transition time between county zoning and these urban growth boundaries. So currently, that property is zoned, I would think, MGA 1 in the county because it's still in our UGB. So there's a lot of factors we probably need to research, not only the UGB map, but we also need to look into a few other factors just to be certain.
Yep. If this comes before us next time, if you could just give us that update.
We will have that information.
Item 12 is ordinance 2023-16 to amend Title 8, Chapter 2, Section 211 of the Franklin Municipal Code relative to special event beer permits. Jessica?
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. So this is a ordinance update that came out of Beer Board, and this would require special events who desire to serve beer at their special event to first have their special event permit from the full BOMA before appearing before the Beer Board.
So
Who thought of this?
This came from the beer board, was recommended by the beer board. What's currently happening is it's sort of conditionally issued, right? You need to, the beer board may issue it, but it's contingent on receiving the special event permit from
The full
BOMA.
board.
So that's how it works now. This would remove that
And
conditional element.
And currently, we do allow applicants to go ahead and submit their application and get on the agenda for beer board prior to receiving the full event permit. This ordinance update would require that they have that full event permit before they can appear before the beer board. So that would be a change for the applicants. And there is a concern about the timing.
Yes.
That's the
I think it
challenge.
makes sense on paper.
Right.
But I think you're gonna have a lot of people who are gonna come back to you and ask for forgiveness. You know what I mean? Or like, can you go ahead and give us an approval? There's not enough time to get XYZ approved, and then you come back after the fact to the beer board and say, this happened 2 weeks ago, but, you know, they had their approval from BOMA, but they didn't get on our agenda, and
You might end up having
It's
to push
re-educating.
special event applicants further out. We have a 90-day now. You might need to add more because you only have one beer board meeting a month.
Right.
And you have 2 BOMA meetings a month. So getting those aligned can be tricky.
I don't think it's a problem for our long-standing special event people. I mean, we're on 30 and 50 and 9 and whatever. I think where it's gonna hurt, it's gonna be those little nonprofits that decide to do an event. And they decide, 60, 90 days before the event, which is quasi-typical. And then their hands are tied because
And
a
another-
lot of times they're not getting permission. It depends on geographics. Like
Right.
if you're doing it at the factory, then you don't really need board approval. But if you're selling the beer, then you do need beer board
Right.
approval.
And that was what I was going to say. A lot of times the special event organizers, they know maybe the date that they're going to have it, but they don't have the times pinned down, or they don't have the exact location for serving beer. And those specifics go on the permit, and we need to know those things.
The other thing I will
At
tell
the
you
time
is
of
the
the
TABC approves within a week. It's all done online. There's no board to go to. So we're a little bit antiquated, which, I think the way we do it is fine. But when you're talking about serving alcohol at a special event, you can get that approved
quickly,
literally within a week, as long as you've got all your paperwork in place.
We just don't want to make the process more cumbersome for our event organizers. But of course, we'll make any updates that are recommended.
Yeah, is there a problem this was trying to solve from the beer board?
Well, certainly we prepared it at the request of the beer board. I kind of wrote it, so I'm happy to do whatever you all ask. What we found looking at this in application is kind of what you're hearing now. It turns into a little bit of a solution looking for a problem. And it also, staff had some concerns because beer board just meets once a month, whereas you all meet twice. What we see when we look at it is you have your sophisticated folks who do a yearly event. They come every time. They know exactly like clockwork how to get everything going. Then you have maybe some smaller, nonprofits or people who kind of do things at the last minute. They've got their own board to deal with to get approval to go forward and all of that. And it can create some crunch periods in time if we make 2 votes or 2 items before you guys have to be done before you can even come to the beer board. And 1 deferral from you all can throw a monkey wrench in the whole thing if your timing was already tight. So staff does have concerns about moving this forward.
Conditionals seem to work okay in our experience, but I want to respect their beer board members here who had requested it, so they should speak to their desire.
And I just speak from somebody who's been doing events for 20 years, and that's no offense to those of you all who serve on the beer board. Anything that we change is going to be education driven. That's just the way it is. It doesn't matter what it is. But I also have of the mind that most people around here, if they're new to the nonprofit world, which 9 times out of 10, that's what these special events are for.
Yes.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, they have to be
They're going to
nonprofit or
seek
charitable.
guidance from their, colleagues.
Right.
And thankfully, we do live in a community where there's that kind of dialogue. I'm of the mindset, don't fix what's not broken, because I think your larger special events, your pilgrimages, your Main Street festivals, your all that, they know what they're doing. Where it's going to get caught up is the people who are giving, who are doing things on a smaller scale, and typically they don't plan out a year in advance. Just going to say.
Right.
Alderman Hanson, I see you pushed
It's
your
lit up.
green light.
I love Alderman Blanton's idea about maybe streamlining it like TABC does. I mean, I don't know if we can, but I do like that idea. And it was actually the larger events we started getting logger jammed on. We had like 5 or 6 in a row that was pending approval. And that's kind of what triggered it. The little ones actually seemed to have their ducks in a row. The hardest thing with the little ones was getting them to show up at beer board. They'd forget or they'd get busy because they are small and it's all voluntary. So that was where the concern came from, it was the big ones.
Alderman Potts.
Thank you, sir. I'll be brief. I use one of Alderman Brown's analogies here. This is chicken or the egg type thing. We were literally passing everything contingent upon getting that event permit. And so we thought the process was reversed. And that's why it came back. Everything.
But don't you do the same thing with certificate of occupancy?
We do.
We can do that too.
I mean, it's the lay of the land.
Right.
You do the same thing with certificate of occupancy.
Yeah.
You assign them permission, but it's not in effect until they get their CO.
Yep. But that's where it surfaced. Is we just had so many of these being passed like that.
Item 13.
do anything with
City of Franklin Contract 2023-0063, Hard Bargain Association for reimbursement of $100,000 for the cost of purchasing vacant land in the Hard Bargain neighborhood to further goal of building affordable deed-restricted homes, Hard Bargain area. That's CDBG money?
It is.
Any questions about that?
Oh.
Great job, Kathleen. 14 is change of name on a liquor license for Life of
Fine.
Riley LLC. Everybody good with that one?
And we will have the background check completed before you vote on it.
Got it today.
Got it? Okay.
And item 15,
So when do we wanna do
we've
that?
been asked to pull that one. It's not quite ready. Item 16 is approving the city's on-call title opinion professional services agreement with multiple contracts listed. There's 2023 190, 191,
Yep.
192,
We got that.
193, and 194. Any questions about
No.
that? And then 17 is peddlers, solicitors, and
yeah,
itinerant
we
merchants,
talked about that.
pop-up commercial merchandise
Vernon.
sales services, and permitting requirements.
Okay.
So Vernon's coming up here. We were also recognize, and Jessica again, we recognize it's 6:47.
Sorry.
So we can maybe give you at least an overview of what we're looking at. We need some feedback down the line because this is a pretty antiquated, outdated ordinance that deals with these. So we'll kind of identify the issue and then maybe have a little more discussion next time if you'd like. But yeah, we'll put it on a little earlier.
We'll start at 2 o'clock.
Merchants.
Just something to think about as Eric mentioned. Thank you, Eric. Jessica and her team and Tom Marsh generally deal with the permitting of peddlers, solicitors, and itinerant merchants. And the ordinance is outdated, quite outdated. And we've worked with the law department and Bill on a number of issues that we'd like to get your input, and we're not going to get it tonight, we understand. But as I've shared, or we put together on the slide, the ordinance was created in the mid-'70s, and the last changes were relatively minor in 2004 and 2009. So right now, something to think about, that a permit is required for every person. Some communities license a company, and then the company works under that permit. So we're presently not issuing to a business or organization. And something to think about that, and if you have a peddler or a solicitor, going into neighborhoods, you might want to do a background check on them because that's what we do. But
We do.
again, if they're
What
an
do we do?
itinerant merchant and selling on a corner, produce or other types of wares, maybe not. So just something to think about. We also have this requirement for $1,000 surety bond per person, per applicant. And that surety bond is for somebody who purchased something from a peddler, merchant, itinerant merchant, or solicitor that didn't get what they thought they were getting, and they could technically come to the city and request that we call their bond to reimburse them. So just think about that. And we're not aware that's ever occurred. And it's just added piece, so I like to say bureaucracy in it. Hey, you can find some humor with this. Peddlers and solicitors' hours of operation are 9 to 7. And today, things are changed a little bit, and the 8 o'clock is for daylight savings time. Do we really want people going door to door at 7 or 8 in the evening, or, pardon me?
So we're talking door to door and pop-up?
Yes.
And
Solicit-
you're
yes.
putting this all together?
Yeah.
That's the way it is now in the ordinance.
Can we separate it out?
Yeah. That's some of the
What we're gonna
input
do?
we're going to
Yeah.
be looking for.
We've got to separate.
But I'm going relatively
Yes,
quickly to
okay.
respect time.
So I just want to understand what we were talking about.
Itinerant merchants, there's been an increased interest in itinerant merchants, which are pop-up retail sales that go on private property, then they get the permission of the property owner, and they selling a broader range of products, tanning services, clothes, and some of them require going into a trailer. So I want you to think about that, or we want you to think about that, about people that, are set up on a corner and they're going inside a unit with the door closed. And how we license them and do background checks should be part of that conversation. The other piece, and for those of you that were part of the food vendor discussion, are at what point do pop-up vendors compete with brick and mortar buildings? And in this particular economy, retailers are having a little bit harder time. Again, we're just scratching the surface and wanted to introduce that. And then finally, the sale of produce, should they be exempt from having a permit because it's so seasonal? And do we want to step back from something like that? Now, we don't, at the factory with the farmers market, we don't permit them, but they're part of an event, so to say. We want to update it. We're looking for your guidance. If we can have some guidance, we'll obviously draft an ordinance based on that feedback, bring it back, and there'll be other pieces that staff will elaborate on based on the input we've been getting.
I just want to add one thing. Go ahead. Did you have something?
I would just say real quickly, the only thing to add to what Vernon said is from our perspective as staff issuing these permits, the itinerant merchant aspect is the part that we've seen the most confusion or concern from customers. And it's really stemming from businesses that want to operate as a mobile business. They don't really want to be a true itinerant merchant as it's defined in the code right now, where it's intended that they pop up temporarily at one location and they have a permit for that for a certain set of time. They want to just go wherever they want within the city and essentially operate as a retail store, but with no specific location. And so that's one thing that I would specifically request some feedback on.
Well, I think specific locations are good. I think we need to sort of look at that. But I would just say, we live in a free market capitalist society. I'm not interested in squelching people's business, especially the food businesses. And people have seasonal businesses, like you have your fruits and vegetables in the spring and the fall, the summer. And then you have wood. There you go. And you have all these different things. And I want to be an accepting community of people's I'm a small business owner. I want to, I've always been sensitive to business owners and making more regulations, making it harder for them to sell their wares and do their things. But do we want tanning salons? Do we want all these other things? And you brought up a great point. They put in a trailer, then people go in, they shut the door. Do you do, what kinds of things do we want? And really, when I look at it, I go across the board and go, what has this community always been about? We've always had the guy selling the tomatoes on the street corner. We've always had the peach truck. We've always had different things. Those things make our community, and I think we ought to protect them and be very careful about them and make sure that we are in a free market and competition. Honestly, I don't care. I think competition is great. And it's not always the people that get in and do a pop-up that are in competition with the people around them. A peach vendor is not in competition around the coffee shops and other places there. So even if they are in competition, I don't think it's not unhealthy to have competition. So I think we have to think broader and say, we're living in the 21st century. How do people do business? There is a fine line, though, with some of this stuff, and do we want every single thing to happen in our community? So I think we have to define what actually is good for selling in our community, and how do we define that? So I think the aldermen need to be thinking about that, and also how do we not overburden small businesses, saying, okay, $1,000 here, you have to get a permit for every site. No, maybe you get one fee, and then you list your sites, and you don't have to pay a fee for every single site. You pay one fee, and that gives you up to 5 sites or 10 sites or whatever. So when they come in and they're selling tomatoes or they're selling peaches or something, they may have 6 sites in our city for a short period of 2 months, and that's it. They're here, they're gone. And there are local people a lot of the times. Most of the time, they're all our local people. So I just want us to be thinking about that because it's going to come back.
Just have a question. Does this incorporate food trailers? Not food trucks, but food trailers?
Well, our food,
That's perfect. If
it's already taken care of. Our mobile food vending ordinance, we worked on for that state.
Are you-
But we'll come back again.
Are you wanting us to email you?
If you want.
Suggestions?
Based
Okay.
on some of this, absolutely. Jessica and myself.